For most of human history, cold was not a small discomfort. It was part of the world that surrounded every body, every shelter, every night, and every newborn life. Long before modern rooms, soft bedding, and simple household warmth, a baby entered a world where heat had to be protected carefully, shared closely, and guarded against air, ground, wind, rain, and darkness. Perhaps warmth came from skin, from fire, from animal hides, from carrying, from sleeping arrangements, or from ways of living that left only faint traces behind. But the deeper question is not only how a baby stayed warm, it is what early humans had to understand about the fragile body before comfort became easy. How ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets. Before any baby could know the meaning of cold, the body already felt it. Cold does not need language. It reaches the skin before thought, before memory, before a child can understand where the night begins or why the air has changed. For an adult, cold may be a discomfort, something to endure, solve, or ignore for a while. For a newborn, it is more immediate. The body is small. The surface of the skin is large compared with the little warmth held inside. The muscles cannot yet create steady heat in the way an older child or adult can. The hands cannot gather coverings. The legs cannot move toward fire. The voice can only call. So when we ask how ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets, the question begins not with an object, but with a weakness that is older than houses, older than woven cloth, and older than the quiet rooms where modern babies sleep. It begins with the first human bodies entering a world that was never designed to be gentle. Long before insulated walls, sealed windows, soft mattresses, and layered bedding, human life unfolded in places where warmth was temporary. A cave might block the wind, but not remove the cold from stone. A shelter of branches, hides, or grass might hold back rain for a time, but not turn night into comfort. Open ground could lose the heat of the day quickly. Damp soil could draw warmth downward. Wind could slip through gaps that no one had the tools to fully close. Even in warmer climates, night, rain, altitude, season, and illness could make the body fragile. This does not mean every ancient landscape was frozen or harsh in the same way. Early humans lived across many environments, and no single picture can stand for all of them. Yet the larger truth is steady enough. For most of human history, warmth was something that had to be made, protected, shared, and watched. It was not simply present in the room. There was no room in the modern sense. There was only a chosen place within the wider world, and inside that place, a newborn body that could not negotiate with the air. The beginning of humanity was not only stone tools, firelight, hunting, or migration. It was also the repeated problem of keeping the smallest members of the group alive through ordinary nights. A baby born into such a world did not just need food. It needed a narrow band of safety around the skin. Too much cold could drain strength. Too much exposure could turn rest into danger. Too much distance from another warm body could matter. These are simple ideas, but they change the way the title should be heard. A blanket is only one answer from a much later world. Before blankets, warmth had to come from relationships between bodies, from the choice of ground, from the edge of fire, from skins and plant materials, from the rhythm of carrying, from people sleeping close enough that heat did not disappear into the dark. But none of these should be treated as one perfect solution. The evidence for daily care in deep prehistory is often indirect. Soft materials vanish. Infant bedding rarely survives. The gestures of hands are gone. The exact sleeping arrangements of long-dead families cannot be recovered as if someone had written them down. What remains is a careful chain of clues, the needs of the human body, the traces of shelter and fire, the tools that may have worked, hides or fibers, the long dependency of human children, and the simple fact that generation after generation did survive. Somewhere in that chain is the quiet answer, but it must be approached slowly. The first thing to understand is that ancient warmth was not a product. It was a condition that people had to build, again and again. Each evening could ask the same question in a slightly different way. Where is the driest ground? Where does the wind pass? How close can warmth be held without danger? What can be placed beneath the body? Who carries the child when movement is necessary? Who stays near when sleep comes? These questions point back to the earliest shape of human life, where survival was not separated from touch, shelter, season, and group memory. A newborn's warmth was never only about covering the body from above. It was about making a small, temporary world inside a much larger cold one. A cold world does not have to be dramatic to be dangerous. It can be quiet. It can arrive slowly after sunset, when the ground gives back the warmth it borrowed from the day, when stones turn cool, when damp air settles low, and when a sleeping body loses heat without noticing the loss at first. This is important, because ancient cold was not always a great wall of ice or a violent storm. Often, it may have been ordinary. It may have been the kind of cold that comes from stillness, from wet leaves, from a draught at the edge of a shelter, from a night that lasts longer than the body expects. For a newborn, ordinary cold could matter more than it would for a walking adult. The first human problem was not simply how to survive rare disasters. It was how to pass through many normal nights, again and again, with a body too small to protect itself. When we imagine ancient humans, we often picture movement, people crossing plains, following animals, gathering food, shaping stone, watching fire. But a baby brings the story down to a smaller scale. The question becomes not only where people went, but where they stopped. Not only what they hunted, but how they slept. Not only what tools they made, but what kind of warmth could be kept close enough to a child whose body could not yet join the work of survival. In that smaller scale, the beginning of human life becomes clearer. Humanity did not begin only with strength. It also began with helplessness carried through time. A newborn human could not cling like many infant primates with the same reliability, could not walk shortly after birth like some herd animals, and could not choose a warmer corner of the shelter. It needed others to make decisions around it. This turns warmth into something more than weather. Warmth becomes an arrangement. It belongs to where people sleep, how close they gather, what materials they place under the body, how they use fire, how they manage wind, and how they remember places that were safer than others. Before blankets, warmth was not one thing. It was a pattern made from many small protections. Some of those protections may have left traces in archaeology, and many probably did not. A hearth can remain as charcoal, ash, burned stone, or altered soil. A stone tool can remain for hundreds of thousands of years. Bones may survive, but a soft lining of grass, a bundle of dry leaves, a hide used for bedding, a carrying wrap made from plant fibre, or the simple closeness of bodies in sleep can vanish without leaving a clear mark. This is why the question must be handled gently. We cannot speak as if we watched an ancient parent wrap a child on a particular night. We cannot assign one universal method to all early people in all places. What we can do is follow the more stable clues. Human infants needed protection from heat loss. Humans lived in groups. They used shelter in many forms. They learned to control fire in at least some contexts deep in our past. They used animal and plant materials when available. They carried children because children could not keep up alone. From these pieces, a careful picture begins to form, not as a single answer, but as a field of possibilities held together by biology and environment. The cold world into which every baby was born was also a world of uneven protection. Some groups lived in warmer regions, where the greatest danger may not have been freezing air, but rain, damp ground, wind after sunset, or a child becoming chilled when wet. Other groups moved through cooler seasons, higher lands, or glacial landscapes where heat would have been harder to preserve. Even within one place, the problem could change by hour. A daytime camp could feel safe in the sun, then become exposed at night. A dry shelter could become damp after rain. A protected hollow could fill with smoke if fire was poorly placed. The same fire that gave warmth also required distance and care. The same hide that blocked wind might hold moisture if not dried. The same close sleeping that shared heat also needed space, attention, and awareness. Nothing in this older world was automatic. Comfort had to be renewed. This brings us back to the origin of the human story. To keep a baby warm before blankets was not only to place something over the child, it was to understand, through repeated experience, that the human body survives inside a fragile boundary. That boundary might be made of arms, breath, skin, dried grass, animal hide, embers, a windbreak, a cave wall, or the nearness of other sleepers. It might change from one night to the next. It might depend on a grandmother's memory of a drier place, a parent's sense of when the wind would turn, or the group's habit of sleeping close when the air became cold. The baby itself would not remember these choices, but the survival of human generations suggests that such choices were made, refined, and passed along in ways that were rarely written into the earth. Before blankets, warmth was a living skill. It belonged to the body, the place, the season, and the group. And in that quiet skill, the ancient question becomes deeper than a piece of bedding. How did early people create a small zone of safety around the most fragile human life in a world that could not promise warmth? The cold world was not only outside the shelter, it was also beneath the body, inside the wind, in the pause after a fire burned low, and in the long hours when sleep made everyone less watchful. For an ancient newborn, warmth could disappear in several directions at once. It could rise into the air, pass into damp ground, leak through uncovered skin, or fade when a body was separated from the people around it. This is why the first layer of the story cannot be a single invention. A blanket, in the modern mind, feels like a complete answer because it covers the body in one simple motion, but before such objects became familiar, warmth must be imagined as a set of conditions that had to be maintained together. A baby could be near fire and still lose heat from the ground. A baby could be covered from above and still be chilled by damp material. A baby could be held close and still be exposed to wind if the shelter was open. The problem was not one surface of the body. It was the whole small body placed inside a changing environment. That changing environment shaped human care from the very beginning. The earliest human communities did not live inside one stable climate, one kind of home, or one fixed routine. They moved, adapted, returned to places, abandoned places, and learned which locations gave some protection. A rock overhang might reduce rain. A cave entrance might block one direction of wind but invite another. A stand of trees might soften the movement of air. A hollow in the land might feel warmer until damp collected there. Dry grass might insulate, but only if it stayed dry. Ash near an old hearth might mark warmth, but fire also needed space, fuel, and attention. When a newborn entered such a world, keeping that child warm was partly a matter of reading the surroundings. It was not only a matter of having something soft, it was a matter of knowing where warmth could remain for the longest time. This is one reason the question leads back to the origin of human life. Human survival has always depended on the ability to notice small differences in place. A few steps away from wind, a drier patch of ground, a wall of stone that held heat a little longer after daylight, a cluster of bodies sleeping close. These details may sound quiet, but for a newborn they could be the difference between rest and stress. The baby would not understand any of it. The group would have to carry that understanding for the child. In that sense, ancient warmth was also memory. It was knowledge stored not in books, but in repeated choices: where to sleep, what to place beneath the body, when to move closer to heat, when smoke was too much, when a covering was damp, when the night was becoming colder than expected. Archaeology can sometimes show the larger frame of these choices. It can show that people made fires in certain places. It can show traces of shelters, worked hides in some contexts, tools that may have scraped skins, and patterns of occupation where humans returned to protected locations. But the exact warmth around an infant is harder to see. The most important things may have been the least durable: plant fibers, fur, loose grass, folded skin, the curve of an arm, a sleeping position, a shared habit passed from older caregivers to younger ones. These do not usually remain in the ground with clear labels. They vanish, leaving only the fact that humans continued to raise children through climates that were not always kind. That absence is not a weakness in the story, it is part of the story. It reminds us not to turn guesswork into certainty. It asks us to stay close to what can be reasonably understood. Human babies needed warmth. Ancient environments often made warmth difficult to preserve. People had bodies, fire in many periods and places, shelters of different kinds, organic materials when available, and social bonds that made long childhood possible. From those broad truths, the first answer begins to take shape without becoming too narrow. Before blankets, A baby's warmth was probably not kept by one object alone, but by a careful combination of closeness, placement, material, firelight, shelter, and attention. The world outside remained large, cold, and uneven. The protected space around the child was small, temporary, and human-made. To hear the title clearly, we have to hold both pictures at once: the vast, ancient night, and within it, a fragile body surrounded by whatever warmth early people could gather, without yet having the simple comfort we now place over a sleeping child. A human baby begins life in a strange position. It belongs to one of the most adaptable species on Earth, yet at birth it is among the least able to adapt by itself. This is one of the quiet paradoxes at the center of human evolution. The adult human body can walk long distances, use tools, plan ahead, control fire, share food, shape shelters, and carry memories across generations. But the newborn body can do almost none of these things. It cannot follow the group, it cannot choose shade or sunlight, it cannot gather dry grass, move closer to warmth, or pull itself away from damp ground. It arrives with needs that are immediate, but with almost no power to meet them alone. When we ask how ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets, we are really asking how a creature so dependent could survive inside a world that demanded constant adjustment. Warmth was one of the first problems that had to be solved for the child by someone else. The newborn body is small, and small bodies lose heat more easily than larger bodies. This does not require a dramatic setting to matter. Even a mild drop in temperature can become important when the body has little stored energy, little muscle control, and no ability to change its own surroundings. A grown person can curl up, walk, reach for fuel, move away from wet soil, or press closer to a fire. A newborn cannot make these choices. It depends on the living arrangement around it. This dependence is not an accident outside the human story. It is part of the human story. Compared with many animals, human childhood is long. Human infants are born needing care, feeding, carrying, protection, and warmth for a long time before they can take part in survival directly. That long dependence may seem like a weakness, but it also sits near the roots of what made human life different. It drew other bodies close. It made care into a repeated task. It forced groups to organize time, sleep, movement, food, and shelter around the slow growth of children. Before a baby could learn from culture, culture had to keep the baby alive. In the deep past, the need for warmth would have touched nearly every decision around a newborn. Where should the baby rest when the ground is cold? Who holds the child while others work? What happens when rain makes the shelter damp? How near can a baby be to fire without smoke or heat becoming dangerous? What material is dry enough to place beneath the body? Which adults or older children sleep close enough to share warmth? These questions do not need to be imagined as spoken thoughts in ancient minds. They are practical pressures built into the situation itself. The baby's body created demands that the group had to answer through behavior. This is why warmth before blankets cannot be separated from social life. A blanket is a portable object. It seems private. One person can fold it, carry it, and place it over a child. But in a world before such familiar bedding, warmth was more likely to be distributed across many layers of human living. A mother's body, another caregiver's arms, a sheltered sleeping place, dry plant matter, animal skin, fire managed at a careful distance, and the presence of nearby sleepers could all become part of the same protective field. None of these layers should be treated as a guaranteed formula for all places and times. Ancient people lived under different skies, with different animals, different plants, different temperatures, and different traditions. But the biological need remained steady. The baby needed other bodies and a managed environment to hold heat around it. This tells us something important about the beginning of human life. The first shelter for a newborn may not have been a structure. It may have been a relationship between bodies and place. Even where people used caves, brush shelters, hide coverings, or later more complex dwellings, the infant still depended on someone noticing its cold, its position, its wetness, its nearness to heat, and its separation from warmth. Stone tools can survive in the earth. Hearths can leave traces. Bones can remain. But the careful adjustments that kept a baby warm were often made of things that vanish. touch, posture, timing, shared sleep, dry leaves, soft skins, and habits passed quietly from one generation to another. The fragility of the newborn body may be one reason human warmth became more than a physical condition. It became part of care itself. To keep a baby warm was to hold the future of the group through one vulnerable body. The child carried no tools, no knowledge, no memory of ancestors, and no ability to protect the fire. Yet if the child lived, it could later receive language, skills, stories, food practices, and ways of reading the land. In that sense, every warm night around a baby was also a bridge between generations. The group protected a body that did not yet know the group existed. Long before comfort became an object, before a blanket could be placed over a sleeping child, the human baby made one fact unavoidable. Survival began with dependence, and dependence required warmth that someone else had to gather, guard, and give. The weakness of a human newborn is not only in its size, it is also in the sudden change from one kind of warmth to another. Before birth, the child is held inside the mother's body, where heat is steady and the outside world has not yet touched the skin. After birth, that same small body enters air, light, moisture, sound, and surfaces that may be cooler than the body itself. Modern life often hides how large this change is. A warm room, clean cloth, prepared bedding, and medical knowledge can make the first hours seem protected. In the older human world, the change would have depended much more on place, season, shelter, fire, and the people nearby. The newborn did not arrive only into a family. It arrived into weather. It arrived into ground, wind, dampness, shade, smoke, and the limits of what the group could gather from the land. This is why the question of warmth before blankets must begin with the infant body. A baby is not a small adult. It cannot respond to cold with useful movement. An adult who feels chilled can curl inward, walk toward a fire, shift away from wet soil, or pull a covering closer. A baby can only signal. It can cry. It can move weakly. It can press toward contact. But the solution must come from someone else. Another person has to notice the cold, dry the skin, change the position, bring the child closer, move it away from wind, or place something warmer beneath it. Long before a blanket could be used as a simple object, warmth depended on attention. It depended on a living response to a body that could not solve its own danger. This dependence belongs to the deep beginning of human life. Human babies grow slowly. They need feeding, carrying, protection, and teaching for a long time. This long childhood is often connected with learning, language, memory, and culture. But before a child could learn anything, it first had to survive the ordinary pressures of the body. Warmth was one of those pressures. A group could make stone tools, follow animals, know plants, and remember paths, but if its infants could not be kept alive through cold nights and damp mornings, its knowledge would not pass forward. In that sense, keeping a baby warm was not a small domestic detail. It was one quiet way the future of the group remained possible. The ancient world offered many possible layers of help, but no single perfect answer. In some places, the danger may have been cool nights after warm days. In others, it may have been long rain, colder seasons, mountain air, or damp shelters where heat disappeared slowly. The same environment that created the problem also offered materials: dry grasses, leaves, bark fibers, animal skins, fur, sheltered stone, sun-warmed ground, embers, and nearby bodies could all matter. Yet none of these should be imagined as a modern blanket. They were more uncertain. They depended on weather, skill, dryness, distance from fire, and the ability of people to arrange a small, safe space inside a larger world. The baby's body made warmth a social matter. It could interrupt movement. It could change where people paused. It could affect who carried what, who slept near whom, and how closely the group gathered when the air cooled. The mother may often have been central, especially through feeding and close contact. But human care in many societies can involve more than one person. We should not project one modern example directly onto deep prehistory. Still, the long dependency of human children makes one broad idea reasonable. Warmth could be shared through a circle of care. Before blankets, the question was not only what covered the baby, It was who noticed, who held, who shifted, who remembered, and who stayed close when warmth began to fade. The newborn body tells us something quiet about human evolution. It shows that survival was never only a matter of strength. A human infant begins life with almost no control over the conditions that surround it. It cannot walk toward warmth. It cannot gather fuel. It cannot choose a dry place. It cannot understand the difference between safe heat and dangerous heat. Yet this fragile body belongs to the same species that crossed landscapes, shaped tools, learned plants, followed animals, and carried knowledge across thousands of generations. That contrast matters. The first days of life reveal a deep human truth. The species that became so capable began each generation with beings that were completely dependent. When we ask how ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets, we are asking how this dependence was made survivable in a world without modern protection. Warmth for a newborn was not a comfort added after everything else. It was part of the basic boundary between life and danger. The child's small body needed help holding heat, especially during sleep, rain, cold wind, or contact with damp ground. But the deeper issue was not only temperature, it was timing. Someone had to notice the problem early enough. Someone had to recognize when the child was wet, exposed, separated from warmth, or resting on a surface that could draw heat away. This kind of care may not leave many physical traces, but it would have shaped daily life. A stone blade can survive. A hearth can leave ash. A cave floor can keep marks of fire and occupation. But the moment when a caregiver shifted a baby closer to the body, replaced damp plant material, or moved the child away from a draft is almost impossible to find in the ground. Still, the need behind those actions is not imaginary. It comes from the human body itself. This is where the origin of human life returns to the center of the story. Early humans did not only adapt by becoming clever toolmakers, they also adapted by becoming beings who could keep helpless children alive for long periods. A long childhood allowed learning, but it also required care before learning could begin. A child could not inherit knowledge unless someone first protected the child's body. Warmth was one of the quiet bridges between biology and culture. It connected skin to shelter, shelter to memory, memory to group habits, and group habits to the survival of the next generation. Before blankets, this bridge may have been built from many ordinary materials and actions. Closeness to an adult body, dry grasses beneath the child, animal skin if available, a wind-blocked space, the controlled edge of fire, and the presence of people sleeping near one another. None of this should be treated as a fixed rule for all ancient humans. Different groups lived in different climates and used different materials. Some may have relied more on body contact. Others may have used hides, plant bedding, or sheltered spaces in different ways. The point is not to invent one exact scene. The point is to understand the pressure that every solution had to answer. A newborn needed warmth that was close, steady, and safe. It needed protection from air, from ground, from wetness, and from being left too far from human attention. This makes the baby not a small detail in prehistory, but a lens through which the whole human way of life becomes softer and more exact. We often imagine ancient survival through adults facing the world, but each generation also had to make room for someone who could not face the world at all. The infant body forced warmth to become social, spatial, and continuous. It had to be carried in arms, built into sleeping places, guarded near fire, and renewed whenever the environment changed. Before warmth became a blanket, it was an ongoing relationship between a fragile body and the people who refused to let the cold take it away. Before warmth became something people placed over a baby, it was something a baby had to receive from another living body. This may be the oldest layer of the question. A blanket is separate from the person who uses it. It can be folded, carried, stored, lost, or replaced. But the human body is always present. It gives heat without being invented. It has skin, breath, arms, and a steady inner temperature that a newborn cannot make secure by itself. In the deepest human past, before woven cloth became ordinary, before bedding became familiar, and before shelter could fully divide people from weather, the first warm place for a baby may often have been another person. We should say this carefully, because the exact gestures of ancient care are not preserved. We cannot see every birth, every sleeping place, or every night. Yet the biological logic is clear enough to follow. A newborn needs warmth close to the skin. An adult body can provide warmth directly. Human infants need carrying and close care for many reasons, and warmth is one of them. When the air cools, when the ground is damp, or when the fire is not enough by itself, the body of a caregiver becomes more than comfort. It becomes a shelter that moves, breathes, listens, and responds. This changes how we imagine ancient protection. The first shelter was not necessarily a cave, a hut, or a roof. It could be the space between a baby and a chest, the fold of an arm, the side of a sleeping body, the nearness of someone who could feel the child becoming cold. Human warmth was not only heat, it was attention attached to heat. A hide or plant lining could not notice if a baby shifted away. A fire could not decide that smoke was too strong. A stone wall could not adjust when the wind changed direction. A person could. That is why body warmth belongs so deeply to the beginning of human life. It joins the physical and the social in one act. To hold a baby close is to offer heat, but also to monitor breathing, movement, wetness, hunger, and distress. Long before care became a system of prepared objects, it may have been a pattern of bodies staying near enough to read one another. The ancient world made this closeness practical. A moving group could not leave a newborn to follow on its own. A sleeping group could not expect a newborn to find warmth alone. A baby had to be carried through landscapes and kept near during rest. This does not mean every culture, or every time, used the same method. Some people may have used slings, skins, woven fibers, or other carriers when materials and skills allowed. Others may have relied more directly on arms, hips, backs, or shared sleeping positions. Many soft materials disappear from the archaeological record, so we should not pretend to know every form. But the central pressure remains. A baby's warmth needed to travel with the group. It could not wait for a fixed room. It could not depend only on a place. The warmth had to move where people moved. This brings the title back to a wider human mystery. The human species did not survive only because adults were strong. It survived because warmth, food, protection, and knowledge could be transferred to those who had none of them yet. A newborn brought nothing useful to a camp in the immediate sense. It could not gather wood, shape stone, or remember a water source. Yet the group had to protect it before it could become a bearer of memory. Body warmth may have been one of the simplest forms of that protection. It required no special object, but it required time, nearness, and tolerance for dependence. In a world before blankets, the baby's first covering may not have been a thing at all. It may have been the living boundary of another human body, held close enough that the cold outside had to pass through care before it reached the child. The body is a kind of shelter that leaves almost no trace. A cave wall may remain. A hearth may leave ash. A stone tool may stay in the soil long after the hands that shaped it are gone. But the warmth of skin against skin disappears completely. No archaeologist can lift it from the ground. No layer of sediment can show exactly how long a newborn was held against a chest, how often a child was shifted from one side to the other, or how many people took turns keeping a small body close when the night grew cold. Yet this lost evidence may have been among the most important forms of protection ancient babies had. Before blankets, the warmest surface available was often not an object at all. It was another human body, already alive, already producing heat, already able to respond when the child changed. This matters because warmth from the body is different from warmth from a fire or a covering. Fire warms from a distance, but it must be managed. It can fade, smoke, burn, or become unsafe when brought too close. A covering can slow heat loss, but it cannot create steady warmth by itself. It depends on the body beneath it. Human contact combines heat with awareness. When a baby is held close, the caregiver can feel small changes, dampness, movement, restlessness, or the need to adjust position. The warmth is not passive, it belongs to a living relationship. In the deep past, when bedding was simple, shelters were open to the weather, and soft materials often came from plants, hides, or fur. This living warmth may have given the infant a small island of stability inside a changing world. The beginning of human life has always included this strange balance. Human infants are weak, but human groups are responsive. The baby cannot protect its own warmth, but it can draw attention, It cannot walk towards safety, but it can be carried into it. It cannot remember where the wind enters the shelter, but older people can remember. Through this connection, the body of one person becomes an extension of the survival of another. That is one reason the question of ancient baby warmth leads beyond tools. It reaches into the older human pattern of carrying helpless life through difficult environments. Carrying itself may have been a powerful form of warmth. A baby held against the body is not lying alone on cold ground. A baby carried close can share heat while the group moves. In many human societies, infants are carried for long periods, sometimes with cloth, skins, straps, or other materials. We should be careful about projecting any single modern practice into all of prehistory, but it is reasonable to see carrying as deeply important because human babies cannot move with a group on their own. If the group travelled through morning cold, light rain, shaded forest, open plain, or wind near water, a carried baby would remain nearer to the warmth and awareness of another body. Before a blanket became an independent layer, carrying may have joined movement and protection in the same act. This does not mean body warmth solved everything. A caregiver can become cold too. A wet body loses heat. A sleeping adult may be less alert. Smoke, insects, damp ground, and hunger could all complicate care. The ancient world did not offer perfect protection simply because people loved their children, but closeness gave early humans a flexible answer. It could be used in a cave, under a branch shelter, beside a fire, during travel, or while resting in a group. It required no preserved artifact, yet it may have shaped countless nights. When we imagine a baby before blankets, we should not picture only absence, as if warmth began with the invention of bedding. We should picture a different kind of presence: arms, breath, skin, shared sleep, and the quiet human ability to make one body into shelter for another. Body warmth was not only useful because it was close, it was useful because it could move with the child through a world that did not stay still. A fire belongs to one place. A sheltered hollow belongs to one place. A dry sleeping surface belongs to one place, but a baby could not always remain in one protected spot. People had to gather food, shift camps, seek water, follow seasonal paths, and respond to weather. In such a life, warmth had to travel. Before blankets, before ordinary cloth, and before fixed rooms made infancy easier to protect, the living body may have been the most portable shelter a newborn had. It could carry heat across open ground, through morning air, under trees, beside rivers, or between resting places. It could adjust when the wind changed. It could turn away from rain. It could bring the child closer or hold the child more securely when the air became cool. This does not mean ancient people had one universal method. The deep past was not one culture with one custom. Some groups may have used animal skins, plant fibers, simple straps, or soft-carrying supports where materials and skills allowed. Others may have relied more on arms, hips, shoulders, or shared sleeping positions. Many of the materials that might have helped carry or cover babies would have been organic, and organic things often vanish. So the exact forms are difficult to recover, but the need behind them is easier to understand. A newborn human could not keep up with a moving group. If the group moved, someone had to carry the child. If the child was carried close, warmth and movement could become part of the same act. This brings us back to the earliest human condition. The human body did not evolve as a sealed machine, come parted from others from the first day of life. It began in dependence. A baby's warmth was shaped by the bodies around it, by the places chosen for rest, and by the group's ability to keep attention on someone who could not protect itself. Body warmth, therefore, was not a small emotional detail placed on top of survival. It was survival expressed through nearness. The infant's skin, the adult's chest, the rhythm of breathing, the pressure of arms, and the shared sleep of a group could all become part of a protective environment. A baby near another body was not outside the world, but the world reached it less directly. The cold had to pass through layers of human presence first. There is also a quiet difference between being warmed and being watched. A covering can trap heat, but it does not know when the baby is shifted. A pile of dry grass can separate the body from the ground, but it cannot respond when it becomes damp. A fire can warm the air, but it cannot choose a safer distance. A human body can do more than warm. It can notice. It can change position. It can share heat while also sensing discomfort, wetness, hunger, or restlessness. That combination may be one of the oldest forms of care. It left almost no artifact, yet it may have carried human generations through ordinary nights. When we think of the first shelters, we often imagine stone, wood, hide, or earth. But for a newborn, shelter may have begun as a living circle. Not a wall, not a roof, not a blanket. A circle of bodies close enough to make warmth less fragile. This is not a complete answer to how ancient humans kept babies warm. It is only the first layer. Fire, ground, skins, plants, shelter, season, and group structure still matter. But without the warmth of another body, all those other layers become harder to understand. Before warmth became an object, it was first a relationship. One body protecting another from a world too large, too cold, and too changeable for a newborn to face alone. Fire changed the human relationship with cold, but it did not remove cold from the world. It made a circle of warmth where there had been open air. It gave light after sunset, heat for tired bodies, and a place around which people could gather. For a newborn, this must have mattered deeply, but not in a simple way. Fire was never a soft blanket. It could warm the space near a shelter, dry materials, help keep dampness away, and make the night less exposed. Yet it could also smoke, fade, burn, and demand constant care. When we ask how ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets, fire has to enter the story carefully. It was powerful, but it was not a complete answer. A baby could not be placed too close without danger. A baby too far away might receive little warmth. Between those two edges was a narrow zone of safety, and that zone had to be managed by people. In the deep human past, fire was not just an object or a tool. It was a condition that had to be maintained. Fuel had to be found. Embers had to be protected. Smoke had to move somewhere. A hearth had to be placed where it could help without making the shelter unbearable. In some places and periods, people clearly used fire. In others, the evidence is more complex, and we should not pretend that every ancient group used fire in the same way at the same time. But where fire was part of daily life, it created something important for infants, a warmer centre inside a colder landscape. That centre may have shaped where people slept, where babies were held, where skins or plant materials were dried, and how bodies gathered at night. Still, fire worked best when combined with other protections. A flame warms the air, but the ground beneath a child can remain cold. A hearth gives heat, but wind can pull warmth away. Smoke may keep insects away or mark a living place, but too much smoke can make breathing difficult. A fire that feels helpful to an adult can still be too bright, too hot, or too unstable for a baby. This is why ancient warmth was likely layered. The infant may have needed body contact, dry material beneath it, some shielding from wind, and a safe distance from heat. Fire was one layer among many, not the whole shelter by itself. This returns us to the beginning of human care. Early people had to live inside uncertainty. They could not turn a dial, close a modern door, or rely on a room that held the same temperature all night. The fire might burn low before morning, rain might make fuel harder to use. A change in wind could bring smoke into a sleeping place. A cold floor could continue drawing heat even while flames glowed nearby. For a newborn, these small changes mattered because the body had little reserve. The child depended on people who could read the fire and the space around it. They had to know, from repeated experience, when warmth was enough, when smoke was too much, and when a sleeping place needed to be shifted. Archaeology can sometimes show the remains of old hearths, burned stones, ash layers, charcoal, and heated earth. These traces tell us that fire belonged to many human landscapes, but they do not show a baby being held near the edge of warmth. They do not show who stayed awake, who moved the child, or how people balanced comfort with danger. The most human part of fire use may be the part that leaves the least evidence: judgment. Before blankets, keeping a baby warm near fire was not simply about having fire. It was about placing the child within a careful distance from heat, smoke, ground, wind, and other bodies. Fire made the night more livable, but it still required human attention to become safe warmth. A fire does not warm a baby in the same way a body does. Body warmth touches, surrounds, and adjusts with every small movement. Fire warms from a distance. It creates a zone, not a covering. Near the center, the heat may be too strong. At the edge, it may be weak. Beyond the edge, the old cold returns. For ancient people, this would have made fire both precious and difficult. It could turn a chosen place into a safer place, but only if people understood its limits. A newborn could not judge those limits. The child could not move back from smoke, turn away from sparks, or crawl toward warmth when the air became cold. The safety of fire had to be managed by the people around the child. This is why fire belongs to the story as a careful boundary rather than a simple miracle. In a modern room, warmth often surrounds us evenly. We forget that heat can be uneven, local, and unstable. A hearth in an open shelter warms one side of the body more than another. A draught can carry heat away. Damp ground can continue pulling warmth downward even while flames shine nearby. A fire may warm the air above the floor while a baby resting too low still feels the cold beneath. A parent or caregiver near the fire could feel some of this and adjust. The baby could not. Before blankets, then, fire would have needed partners, a dry surface, a sheltered place, another body, and materials that slowed heat loss. Fire alone did not create comfort. It created an opportunity for comfort, if people could arrange the space around it. The origin of human life is often told through the mastery of flame, but mastery is too strong a word if we imagine total control. Fire requires cooperation with weather. It depends on dry fuel, airflow, and attention. Rain can weaken it, wind can change it, smoke can fill a shelter, fuel can run low at the worst hour of night. For a newborn, these uncertainties matter because the body's needs do not pause when the fire becomes difficult. The child still needs warmth if the wood is damp. The child still needs protection if the smoke shifts. The child still needs a safe distance if the flame rises. Ancient warmth was therefore a moving balance. Too close to heat could be dangerous. Too far from heat could leave the baby cold. The safest place was not fixed. It had to be found again and again. Fire may also have helped indirectly. It could dry hides, grasses, or plant bedding. It could make a resting place less damp. It could warm stones or earth near a hearth, though we should not turn this into a universal practice without evidence. It could draw people together, making shared body warmth easier. A group gathered near fire might create a warmer pocket of air and bodies inside a wider cold landscape. In that sense, fire did not replace human closeness. It may have strengthened it. People could sit or sleep near one another around the same source of heat, with a baby held at the safer edge of warmth rather than exposed alone to the night. Archaeological traces of fire can be more visible than traces of infant care. Burned sediment, charcoal, ash, and hearth features can survive where soft coverings cannot. But these traces still do not tell the whole story. They show that fire was present, not exactly how it was used around a newborn. The most important decisions were small and temporary: how near to sit, where to place dry materials, when to move away from smoke, when to add fuel, when to hold the child closer because the heat had faded. Those decisions vanish with the people who made them, yet the need for such decisions is grounded in what newborn bodies require. Before blankets, fire was likely one of the great helpers of warmth, but only when joined with judgment. It lit the edge of the ancient night, but the baby still depended on human bodies to turn that heat into safety. Fire helps us understand why ancient warmth was never only about heat. Heat can be present and still not be safe. A flame can glow beside a shelter while a baby remains too close to smoke, too near to sparks, too low against cold ground, or too far from the warmest air. This is the delicate edge of the story. Before blankets, people did not simply find warmth and place a child inside it. They had to shape warmth into something usable. Fire made that possible in many human settings, but it also demanded judgment. It had to be kept alive without becoming too much. It had to be near enough to matter, but distant enough not to harm. It had to dry materials without filling the sleeping place with smoke. It had to gather people without making the center of the shelter dangerous for the most fragile body there. A newborn could not understand this balance. The balance belonged to the adults and older children around it. In that sense, fire reveals one of the earliest human skills that does not look like a tool. It is the skill of managing conditions. A stone edge can cut, a wooden point can pierce, a container can hold water, but fire creates a changing environment. It asks for attention over time. It changes with wind, fuel, dampness, and distance. For ancient caregivers, keeping a baby warm near fire may have meant watching not only the child, but the whole little world around the child. The ground beneath had to be considered. The air above had to be considered. The shelter walls, the direction of smoke, the position of sleeping bodies, and the dryness of skins or plant materials all mattered. The baby's warmth came not from one source, but from the careful meeting of several sources. This returns us to the deep beginning of human life, where survival was rarely a single invention. Human beings became human through combinations: hand and stone, memory and path, food and sharing, body and shelter, fire and care. A baby before blankets sat at the center of these combinations. Fire could make the night less hostile, but body contact could keep warmth close. Dry grass or hide could reduce heat loss to the ground, but fire could help keep those materials drier. A cave wall or branch shelter could slow the wind, but people still had to choose where to rest inside it. The infant's body made all of these decisions more exact. What might be tolerable for an adult could be too much for a newborn. What might feel like mild smoke or mild cold to a grown body could become a greater burden for a child with little control. Archaeology gives us the larger outline of fire in human places, but not the intimate details. We may find hearths, ash, burned bone, heated stone, or layers of occupation. These tell us that fire was part of human life in many times and locations. They do not tell us how a particular baby was held near the warmth, whether a hide was dried nearby, or how a sleeping group arranged itself when the fire burned low. The most important acts may have been ordinary and repeated: adding fuel before the coldest hours, shifting a child closer to a warm body, moving away from smoke, choosing a drier corner, or keeping bedding material from becoming damp. Such acts rarely become fossils. Yet they are exactly the kinds of acts that make the title meaningful. Fire was not the answer by itself. It was part of a human-made pocket of protection. Before blankets, keeping babies warm likely depended on turning unstable heat into steady care. The ancient night remained outside the circle. Wind still moved. Ground still cooled. Fuel still burned down. But around the child, people could gather warmth from flame, body, shelter, and memory, then hold it together for a while. That temporary holding may have been one of the quietest forms of human intelligence. The things that may have kept an ancient baby warm were often the very things least likely to survive. Stone lasts. Bone can last. Burned earth can last. But softness is fragile. Grass dries, breaks, and disappears. Leaves rot. Bark fibers decay. Fur loosens. Hides break down. Unless conditions are unusually favorable, a carrying strap, a sleeping mat, a nest of plant material, or a piece of animal skin placed between a baby and the cold ground could vanish completely. This is why the story of warmth before blankets is partly a story of missing evidence. The most important objects may have been made from materials that the earth usually takes back. When we ask how ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets, we must remember that absence in the ground does not always mean absence in life. A soft thing can be essential and still leave almost nothing behind. This is especially true in the deep beginning of human life, where daily care was made from what people could gather, shape, dry, carry, and reuse. Before woven blankets became familiar, people could still have used many insulating materials. Animal skins and fur are obvious possibilities where hunting, scavenging, or animal processing made them available. Dry grasses, reeds, leaves, moss, bark, and plant fibers could also help create a layer between the body and cold surfaces. We should not imagine these materials as neat modern bedding. They would have depended on climate, season, local plants, animal remains, and skill. Some places had more useful hides. Others had more grasses or leaves. Some materials would have been dry and helpful one day, damp and useless the next. Yet the basic idea is simple and widely grounded in how heat works. A baby loses warmth faster when placed against cold or wet surfaces, and dry, airy materials can help slow that loss. The challenge was keeping those materials dry, clean enough, close enough, and safe enough for a fragile child. This is where archaeology becomes both helpful and limited. Tools used for scraping hides, cutting plants, or processing materials can survive in some contexts. Hearths can suggest places where skins or bedding materials might have been dried. Occupation floors can show where people returned and lived, but the exact soft layer around an infant is usually gone. A piece of hide used as bedding may leave no clear trace. A bundle of dry grass may vanish. A plant fiber sling may decay. The careful arrangement of materials under and around a child may disappear before anyone could ever find it. So the honest answer must avoid pretending to know too much. We can say that organic materials were available in many ancient environments, and that humans have long used animal and plant materials for shelter, clothing, bedding, carrying, and insulation. We cannot say that every group used the same material, or that every baby was warmed in the same way. The wider human story is not one method, but adaptation to place. In a cold open landscape, a hide might matter greatly. In a damp forest, dry plant material might be difficult to keep useful unless sheltered. Near a hearth, materials could be warmed or dried, but they also had to be kept from sparks. In a cave or rock shelter, bedding might reduce contact with cold stone. In a temporary camp, whatever could be gathered quickly might become the difference between exposure and rest. The baby's body made these choices urgent. It did not need a perfect blanket. It needed layers that slowed the escape of warmth. It needed something beneath, something around, and someone nearby to notice when those layers failed. This missing world of soft materials changes how we think about ancient care. The past is not only what survives in museums. Much of human survival may have depended on perishable things. Dried grass, folded hide, bark fiber, fur, smoke-dried material, and the hands that arranged them. Before blankets, warmth may have been built from temporary softness, gathered again and again from the living landscape. Soft materials change the way we understand ancient survival. They do not look powerful. A handful of dry grass, a patch of fur, a piece of softened hide, or a layer of leaves seems small beside fire, stone, and shelter. Yet for a newborn, small layers can matter. The body loses warmth not only into cold air but also into whatever it touches. If the ground is stone, damp soil, wet grass, or packed earth, the child can lose heat downward even while the air above feels calm. This is why the question before blankets must include what lay beneath the baby, not only what covered the baby from above. A modern blanket makes us think of warmth as something placed over the body. In older conditions, warmth may often have begun underneath, with separation from the cold surface of the world. Dry plant material could create space between skin and ground. Animal hide or fur could slow heat loss. Bark, reeds, moss, leaves, or grasses might form a temporary resting layer where they were available. None of these materials should be imagined as clean, uniform, or always present. Ancient people lived in different places, and each place offered different possibilities. A dry grassland, a forest floor, a river valley, a rocky shelter, and a colder open steppe would not provide the same bedding. The usefulness of any material depended on weather, season, dryness, and how much time people had to gather and prepare it. But the basic problem was shared. A baby needed a small zone where warmth did not disappear too quickly into the ground. This returns the story to the first human starting point. Human infants were not born into a world of objects waiting for them. They were born into landscapes. The landscape had to be read. Which plants were soft enough? Which were dry? Which hides could be used again? Which material held dampness and became dangerous? Which place near the fire was warm but not smoky? Such knowledge does not require written language to be real. It can live in repeated behavior, in imitation, in older people showing younger people how to arrange a resting place. The child would never remember the layer of grass beneath it, but the group's memory could preserve the habit. In this way, soft materials became part of culture before they became durable artifacts. The difficulty for us is that these materials disappear from the record. Archaeology often preserves the hard frame of life, stone tools, bones, hearths, sometimes traces of structures. The softer frame is less visible. A baby resting on dry grass might leave nothing clear behind. A hide used near a hearth could decay. A plant fibre support could vanish. Even when ancient bedding is found in rare conditions, it cannot be turned into a universal rule for all early humans. The honest path is to say that soft, organic materials were likely important where available, but their exact use varied, and is often uncertain. This uncertainty does not weaken the story, it makes it more careful. Before blankets, keeping a baby warm was probably not one invention that suddenly solved cold. It was a practical relationship with the materials of a place. People may have used what insulated, what dried, what could be carried, what could be replaced, and what could be arranged close to other sources of warmth. A hide alone was not enough if it was wet. Grass alone was not enough if the wind entered the shelter. Fire alone was not enough if the child lay against cold stone. Body warmth alone could be strained if the night was long and the air damp. But together, these layers could make a small difference. And small differences are often how fragile lives survive. The ancient baby did not need comfort in the modern sense. It needed enough warmth held close for another hour, another sleep, another morning. Soft materials may have served that quiet purpose, then disappeared almost completely, leaving us with the shape of a human need and the silence of things that once protected it. The missing materials of ancient warmth remind us that human history is not only made of what survives, it is also made of what was used, worn down, carried away, burned, replaced, and forgotten by the ground. A baby kept warm with dry grass would not leave the same kind of evidence as a stone tool. A hide placed beneath a child might decay. A fur covering might be reused until it broke apart. A bundle of leaves might be thrown away the next morning. A strip of bark, fibre, or plant cord might disappear after a season of use. Yet these fragile things may have stood between a newborn body and the cold surface of the world. Before blankets, warmth may have depended on materials that were never meant to last for thousands of years. They were meant to last through the night. This changes the way we listen to the silence of the deep past. When soft materials are gone, it can be tempting to imagine that ancient people had less than they probably did. But people living close to the land notice materials with great care. They notice which grasses stay springy, which leaves hold dampness, which bark can be softened, which hides block wind, which fur holds warmth, and which dry places keep materials useful. We should not invent exact methods for every group, yet we can recognize that humans have always been material learners. The first human world was not empty until durable objects appeared. It was full of things that could be gathered, tested, arranged, and abandoned when they failed. The newborn body made this learning more urgent. A baby did not need a perfect bed. It needed enough separation from cold ground, enough protection from moving air, enough dryness near the skin, and enough nearness to another warm body. A few layers could matter: dry grass under a hide, a fur turned inward, a sheltered corner near a hearth, a plant mat lifted away from damp soil, a caregiver's body over or beside the child. The details would have changed from place to place, but the logic remains tied to the same ancient problem: how to hold a small amount of warmth around a small body in a world that keeps taking it away. This is where archaeology asks us to be humble. Sometimes preserved plant remains, fibres, or bedding traces appear in special conditions, and they can open rare windows into ancient daily life. More often, those windows are closed. We may find the hearth but not the grass beside it. We may find the scraper but not the hide it helped prepare. We may find the cave floor but not the sleeping arrangement that once made one corner warmer than another. The evidence is uneven, and an honest story must not fill every gap with certainty. Still, the absence of soft objects does not erase the human need they likely served. It simply reminds us that the most intimate care is often the least visible later. The deep beginning of human life was shaped by this hidden layer. Infants forced people to turn landscapes into temporary protection: a dry plant, an animal skin, a patch of moss, a hollow sheltered from wind, a warmed place near fire, a body held close. Each could become part of a small living system. None of it needed to be permanent. In fact, much of it was valuable because it could be changed. If a layer became damp, it could be replaced. If smoke shifted, the child could be moved. If the ground cooled, more material could be added. If the fire faded, another body could close the gap. Before blankets, warmth was not a single possession. It was a repeated act of arrangement. That may be the quiet lesson of these vanished materials. Human comfort did not begin with luxury. It began with noticing what the world could give and how quickly the world could take it back. The baby's warmth was built from perishable things, but the care behind them was not small. It helped carry human generations forward through nights whose evidence has mostly disappeared. The coldest surface in an ancient shelter was not always the air. Very often, it may have been the ground. Air moves around the body, but ground receives the body's weight. It presses upward through stone, packed earth, damp soil, sand, old ash, or grass that has lost the warmth of daylight. A grown person can feel that cold and shift position. They can curl their legs, sit nearer to a fire, add material beneath themselves, or move to a drier place. A newborn cannot do this. If placed on a cold or damp surface, the child depends entirely on someone else to understand what the ground is taking away. Before blankets, keeping a baby warm was therefore not only about covering the child from above, it was also about protecting the child from below. This matters because the ground belongs to every ancient scene. A cave floor may be sheltered from wind, but stone can remain cold. A rock overhang may block rain, but the earth beneath it can hold dampness. A temporary camp on open land may feel dry in the afternoon, then become cool after sunset. Even near a fire, the surface under a baby could still pull heat from the body. Fire warms unevenly. Body warmth can help. Hides or plant layers can help. But if the child lies directly against a cold surface, warmth has another path of escape. The ground becomes a quiet enemy, not dramatic, not visible, but constant. For early humans, learning to manage that surface may have been as important as learning where to build a fire. The beginning of human life was always tied to place. A baby did not rest in an abstract shelter. It rested on something. That something had texture, moisture, temperature, and distance from wind or flame. People who lived close to the land would have noticed such differences because their own bodies taught them. A dry patch feels different from damp soil. A layer of grass feels different from bare stone. Ash, leaves, reeds, moss, bark, or animal skin each changes the contact between body and earth. We cannot say exactly which material was used in every ancient group. The evidence is too uneven, and most soft materials disappear. But the need for separation is simple and grounded in the body. A newborn needed to be kept from losing heat into the surface beneath it. The simplest answer may have been layering. Not a modern mattress, not a neat bed, but a small zone made from whatever the environment could provide. Dry grass might lift the body slightly away from dampness. A hide might block wind and ground cold. Fur might hold warmth close if it was available and dry. Leaves or plant matter might make a temporary cushion. In a cave or rock shelter, such layers could soften contact with stone. In a camp under branches, they could make the difference between resting on earth and resting above it. The material itself did not need to be beautiful. It only needed to slow the movement of warmth away from the baby. This returns the question to the deeper human pattern. Before comfort became an object bought and stored, it was a repeated adjustment between body and landscape. People had to ask, through experience rather than written rules, where the ground was dry enough, what material was clean enough, which layer had become damp, and how close the baby could be to warmth without danger. The child's body made the ground more important, because the child could not correct the problem alone. If a layer failed, someone had to notice. If the night became wetter, someone had to respond. If the fire warmed the air but not the floor, someone had to change the arrangement. The ground leaves its own traces in archaeology. Hearth floors, occupation layers, stones, ash, sometimes plant remains in rare conditions. But the small sleeping place of an infant is much harder to see. The important thing may have been a patch of dry grass that vanished, a hide that decayed, or a repeated habit of never placing the baby directly on the coldest surface. Before blankets, warmth had to be defended from every direction. The ground was one of those directions, silent and close. always touching the body unless people placed something between the child and the earth. The ground could take warmth quietly because it was always in contact with the body. A cold wind is easy to imagine, rain is easy to see, fire is easy to remember because it glows. But the earth beneath a sleeping place works more silently. It does not need to move. It does not need to make sound. Stone, packed soil, damp leaves, or wet grass can draw heat away while the air above still seems calm. For a newborn, this hidden loss mattered because the body had little ability to answer it. A baby could not lift itself onto a drier layer. It could not roll away from a cold patch with purpose. It could not decide that one corner of the shelter held warmth better than another. Someone else had to understand the surface beneath the child. Before blankets, that understanding may have been one of the first forms of practical care. A baby's warmth did not begin only at the skin facing upward. It began where the body touched the world. This is why ancient sleeping places were not just empty ground with people lying on them. Even when the evidence is faint, it is reasonable to think that humans often tried to modify the surface where they rested. Adults themselves would have felt the difference between bare stone and a layer of dry grass, between damp soil and a hide, between cold earth and a place near old ash or sheltered from rain. The body teaches these lessons directly. No formal science is needed to notice that dry material feels warmer than wet material, or that lifted, padded, airy layers feel different from flat ground. In the deep beginning of human life, such lessons could become habits. A group might return to a drier spot, gather fresh plant matter, keep a hide from becoming soaked, or choose a sleeping place where water did not collect. The baby, who could not learn the landscape yet, depended on those who already had. This connects the question of warmth to the wider human skill of reading place. Early humans did not survive by overpowering the environment in a modern sense. They survived by noticing small differences inside it. A slope that drained water, a patch of grass that dried faster, a rock wall that blocked wind, a place where smoke could rise instead of settling low, a corner where the ground stayed less damp after rain. These details may seem humble, but for a newborn they could shape the whole night. If the surface beneath the child was cold, the heat gathered from body contact or fire could still leak away. If the surface was dry and layered, the same amount of warmth could last longer. So the ground was not separate from the story of fire, skin, and shelter. It was part of the same fragile system. The materials used against the ground would have depended on what the land offered. In some places, grasses, reeds, leaves, bark, moss, or small branches could create a temporary lift from the earth. In others, animal skins or fur may have been used when available. These materials were not modern bedding, and they should not be imagined as always clean, soft, or abundant. They could become damp, smoky, worn, or infested. They might need to be replaced often. Their usefulness depended on weather and care. But even imperfect layers could reduce direct contact with cold surfaces. For a newborn, imperfect help could still matter. A small delay in heat loss, a drier resting place, or a slightly warmer surface could be enough to make the child's body less exposed during the long hours of sleep. Archaeology can sometimes point toward prepared living floors, hearth areas, or rare preserved plant bedding, but it rarely shows the exact place where a baby rested. The most likely protections from the ground were often too soft and temporary to remain. That absence should make the story more careful, not empty. Before blankets, keeping babies warm meant thinking downward as well as upward. It meant placing something between the child and the earth, then watching whether that boundary still held. The ground was always there, patient and cold, and human care had to answer it again each night. The ground brings this question back to one of the oldest facts of human life. Every body must rest somewhere. A baby held in arms could be warmed by another body, but arms become tired. A group beside a fire could sit close together, but sleep still had to come. At some point in every night, the child had to be placed, supported, or held in a way that allowed the caregivers themselves to rest. That moment made the surface beneath the baby important. Before blankets, before raised beds, before floors separated people from earth, the sleeping place was part of survival. It was not background. It was one of the silent forces shaping whether warmth stayed near the child or disappeared into the land. The danger of the ground was not always extreme cold. It could be dampness after rain, stone that stayed cool in a cave, soil that lost heat after sunset, or grass wet with night moisture. These ordinary conditions matter because newborn warmth is easily disturbed. A child might be close to an adult, near a hearth, and partly covered by a hide or plant material, yet still lose heat where the body touched the surface below. This is why ancient warmth had to be layered. Body warmth protected one side, fire warmed the shared space, shelter reduced wind and rain. But something still had to answer the ground. A dry layer beneath the baby could make the difference between contact with the cold earth and a small buffer of safety. This is not a dramatic invention, but it is deeply human. Early humans survived through many such small buffers. A stone tool, a carried ember, a remembered path, a dry sleeping patch, a hide kept from rain, a bundle of grass replaced before it became wet. None of these alone explains human survival. Together, they show a species that learned to live by small adjustments repeated over time. A baby made those adjustments urgent because the child could not perform them. If the ground was wrong, someone else had to change it. If a layer grew damp, someone else had to notice. If the sleeping place became colder as the fire faded, someone else had to bring warmth back through movement, material, or touch. This is where the beginning of human care becomes visible, even when the objects disappear. The ground forced people to think in directions. Warmth was not only above the child, it was below, around, beside, and between bodies. A newborn might need to be lifted from cold stone, placed on dry grass, held against skin, shielded from wind, and kept at a safe distance from smoke. The exact combination would depend on place. In a rock shelter, the problem might be the chill of stone. In a forest, it might be wet leaves and damp soil. In an open landscape, it might be night wind moving across the ground. In a colder season, every surface might feel less forgiving. No single ancient scene can answer all of these worlds, but every scene asks the same kind of question. How can a fragile body be separated from the parts of the environment that take warmth away fastest? Archaeology can give us clues, but not a complete sleeping map. A hearth may show where warmth once gathered. A living floor may show where people returned. Rare preserved plant remains can suggest that bedding or surface preparation existed in some ancient context. Tools may show that hides were worked. But the infant's exact resting place is usually beyond recovery. The old layers of grass, leaves, fur, skin, and ash are mostly gone. What remains is the logic of the body and the environment. A baby before blankets needed a protected surface as much as a covering. The child needed people to make the earth less direct. That may be one of the quietest answers hidden inside the title. Before humans could offer babies the softness of a blanket, they first had to make the ground less cold, less wet, and less powerful against a body that had only just entered the world. A baby before blankets did not live only in a sleeping place. It lived in movement. Human groups in the deep past were not always fixed beside one hearth or one shelter. Many people had to move through landscapes to gather plants, follow animals, find water, avoid danger, or return to places that were useful in different seasons. A newborn could not take part in that movement by itself. It could not walk beside the group. It could not climb over rough ground. It could not choose shade, sunlight, or shelter from wind. So the child had to be carried. And once a baby is carried, warmth becomes part of movement. The question is no longer only how a child stayed warm at night, but how warmth travelled through the day before there were modern coverings, soft strollers, sealed rooms, or easy bedding. Carrying may have been one of the most important answers, though it is also one of the hardest to see in the archaeological record. Arms leave no trace. The pressure of a child against a chest leaves no fossil. A sling made from hide, plant fibre, or early cloth may disappear unless rare conditions preserve it. A strip of softened skin, a woven band, or a bark fibre support might once have helped hold a baby close, then vanished completely. We should not claim that every ancient group used the same kind of carrier. Materials, climates, and traditions would have differed, but the need itself is stable. Human infants could not move with adults. Someone had to carry them, and carrying close to the body could also protect warmth. This connects directly to the beginning of human life. The human newborn is dependent not only while sleeping, but while the group is awake. It needs warmth when the morning air is cold, when the wind rises, when rain has passed, when shade makes the body cool, or when a long walk keeps adults moving through changing temperatures. A baby held close to another body is less exposed than a baby placed apart. The caregiver's body can block some wind, share heat, and respond if the child becomes wet or cold. If some material was wrapped or tied around the child, it could help hold the child against the body and slow heat loss. But even without knowing the exact design, the principle is clear. Carrying made the adult body into a moving shelter. It allowed warmth to follow the group, rather than remain in one place. This does not mean carrying was easy. A baby has weight. The caregiver also needs food, water, tools, fuel, or gathered materials. In a moving life, every load matters. The presence of a newborn could change the pace of a day, the distance travelled, the choice of paths, and the way tasks were shared. This is why infant warmth belongs to population and generation, not only to personal care. A group that raises slow-growing children must organise movement around those children. Someone may carry the baby. Someone else may carry fuel, food, or tools. Older children or other adults may help in ways that vary from culture to culture. We must be careful not to project one modern pattern backward as a certainty. Yet the broad pressure is difficult to avoid. A helpless child makes survival more cooperative. The movement of adults has to make space for the stillness of a baby. In colder or wetter conditions, carrying close could be especially useful because it reduced separation from human warmth. But it could also create new problems. If the carrier became wet, the baby might become wet. If the adult overheated during hard movement, the child's position might need adjustment. If smoke from a fire clung to materials, if rain soaked a hide, or if wind entered from the side, warmth could still be lost. Ancient care was not a perfect system. It was a chain of adjustments. The child might be held closer for warmth, shifted for comfort, protected with a skin, placed down on dry material for rest, then lifted again when movement resumed. Before blankets, warmth was not locked in one object. It moved through arms, shoulders, hips, backs, straps, skins, and the careful choice of when to stop. The baby's body made the whole landscape more complicated. A path was not only a path for walking adults. It was a path along which warmth had to be carried. A shelter was not only a place to rest. It was where a carried child could be set down without losing too much heat. A fire was not only a centre of camp. It was where damp materials might be dried before the next movement. In this way, carrying joins the body, the group, and the land into one slow system of survival. Long before a blanket could be folded around a child, warmth had to travel with human care. Carrying a baby through an ancient landscape was not only a matter of transport, it was also a way of keeping the child inside a warmer human boundary while the larger world changed around the group. A sleeping place could be arranged with grass, hide, fire, and shelter, but movement broke that arrangement apart. When people left the camp, the baby left the prepared surface, the familiar hearth, and the small pocket of warmth made the night before. The child entered morning air, shade, dust, rain, wind, and the uneven rhythm of walking bodies. Before blankets, this made carrying more than a convenience. It turned the caregiver into a moving climate. The body that carried the child could block some wind, share heat, and keep the baby near enough to be watched. The warmth was not perfect, but it moved. That made it different from fire, ground layers, or a sheltered wall. It could follow the path. The exact ways ancient humans carried infants are difficult to know. Arms are not preserved. Postures are not preserved. Soft carriers made from hide, bark fibre, plant cord, or early textiles rarely survive. We must avoid claiming one universal method. Yet the broad need is hard to escape. Human infants cannot travel by themselves, and mobile groups could not stop moving for years while children grew. Some form of carrying had to exist, whether by arms alone, by holding against the hip, by supporting the baby against the chest or back, or by using materials when available. In many human societies, carrying keeps infants close for long periods, but no single living practice should be copied directly into the deep past. The safer point is simpler. Carrying allowed an infant to remain near warmth, milk, attention, and protection while the group continued its daily life. This brings the story back to the origin of human dependence. A baby changed the shape of movement. Adults might be able to walk faster without a child, but the presence of a newborn slowed the world down. A path had to be taken with a carried body in mind. A steep place, a wet crossing, a cold wind, or a long stretch without shelter could become more difficult when someone carried the most fragile member of the group. In that way, infant warmth was connected to planning. Not planning in the modern written sense, but the older planning of bodies, where to pause, when to rest, how to share loads, which route gives less exposure, how to keep the child dry when weather changes. A baby's warmth became part of the group's movement through space. Carrying also shows why warmth was social rather than private. One person holding the child could not do everything else at the same time. Carrying uses arms, strength, balance, and attention. If a caregiver held a baby close to preserve warmth, someone else might carry tools, gathered food, fuel, or other materials. If the child needed feeding, movement might pause. If the air became colder, the baby might be drawn closer to the body or covered with whatever material was available. If the carrier grew tired, another person might help, depending on the group and situation. We cannot know the exact pattern for every ancient family, but the pressure is clear. A slow-growing infant made survival a shared arrangement. The baby's warmth travelled through cooperation. This is where carrying becomes more than an image of a parent and child. It becomes a clue to the human way of life. Humans did not keep newborns warm only by surrounding them with objects. They kept them inside networks of bodies, roots, pauses, shelters, fires, and remembered places. A child carried close could pass through cold morning air without being completely exposed to it. A child held against skin could be warmed while the group moved away from a damp camp. A child supported by hide or fibre could be kept near the caregiver while hands remained partly free. Each possibility depends on place and time, and none should be treated as certain for all people. But together they show why the question before blankets cannot be answered only at night. Warmth had to survive the day as well. It had to cross distance. It had to be carried over ground, through wind, and between temporary shelters until another place of rest could be made again. Movement made warmth uncertain. A baby could be warm in one moment, held near a body beside a sheltered fire, and then exposed to cooler air when the group began to travel. The ancient world did not pause for infancy. Food had to be found. Water had to be reached. Fuel had to be gathered. Camps had to shift when conditions changed. A newborn could not understand any of this, yet its body had to move through it. Before blankets, warmth had to survive these transitions. It had to leave the sleeping place, cross the open ground, and arrive at the next place of rest without disappearing completely. Carrying was one way human care crossed that distance. It kept the child near the only warmth that could move with intention, another person. This is why carrying belongs so deeply to the question of how babies stayed warm. A baby placed alone in a fixed shelter might be protected for a while, but a moving group needed warmth that could travel. The caregiver's body could block some of the wind. The curve of an arm could reduce exposure. A chest, back, hip, or shoulder could become a warm surface. If skins, fibers, straps, or other soft materials were available, they might have helped hold the child closer and reduce the effort of carrying. We should not turn this into a single picture. Deep human history includes many environments and many possible traditions. Some materials would have been common in one place and rare in another. Some groups may have had better ways to prepare hides or fibers than others, but the core pressure remained steady. The baby could not move itself, so the baby's warmth had to be carried by the group. This brings us again to the beginning of human life. A newborn is not only a person who needs protection at night, it is a person who changes the rhythm of the whole day. If the air is cold in the morning, the child must be warmed before travel. If rain falls, the child must be kept from becoming wet. If the group crosses shade, wind, or higher ground, the carrier may need to adjust how closely the child is held. If the baby sleeps while the group moves, its stillness makes warmth even more dependent on position and covering. The child does not participate in movement, yet movement is organized around the child's limits. That is one of the quiet ways infancy may have shaped human cooperation. Carrying also made warmth something that could be shared across time. A tired caregiver might not be able to hold a child in the same way for many hours. Someone else might help, depending on the group, the task, and the moment. A material support might allow the baby to stay close while the adult's hands remained partly useful. A stop near shelter or fire might allow the child to be placed on dry material for rest. Then the baby might be lifted again when the group moved on. Warmth was not one continuous object. It was a sequence of transfers, from body to material, from fire to body, from resting place to arms, from one caregiver to another, from one camp to the next. The archaeological record can rarely show this sequence. It may show camps, hearths, tools, bones, or traces of plant and animal use. It does not show the small adjustments of a carried child. It does not show when a baby was turned away from wind, when a damp covering was changed, or when the group paused because the child needed care. Yet these missing gestures are not empty imagination. They follow from what human babies are and what mobile human life required. Before blankets, keeping babies warm was not only a night problem, it was also a travel problem, a carrying problem, a pacing problem, and a cooperation problem. The baby's warmth had to move through the same world the adults moved through, but with far less tolerance for cold, wetness, and exposure. In that older world, to carry a baby was to carry a small climate of care across the land. A shelter is not the same as a house. This difference matters when we think about babies before blankets. A house, in the modern mind, is a sealed place. It has walls, a roof, a floor, and often a controlled temperature. It separates the body from weather so completely that cold becomes something outside the window. Ancient shelter was usually more fragile than that. It might have been a cave entrance, a rock overhang, a brush structure, a hide-covered frame, a windbreak, a hollow protected by trees, or a temporary camp arranged around fire. Such places could help, but they did not erase the outside world. Wind could still enter, ground could still be cold, smoke still had to move, rain could still change everything. So when we ask how ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets, shelter must be understood not as a finished room, but as a small change in the environment. It made the world a little less dangerous, not perfectly safe. For a newborn, that small change could matter greatly. A rock wall could block wind from one side. A cave could reduce exposure to rain. A branch shelter could soften the force of weather. A group sleeping close inside a protected space could hold more warmth than scattered bodies in the open. A fire near the center could warm the air, while dry material under the child reduced contact with cold ground. The shelter did not need to be comfortable in a modern sense. It only needed to create a better pocket of conditions than the world outside. This pocket is sometimes called a microclimate, but the idea is simple. A place can be slightly warmer, slightly drier, slightly calmer, and slightly less exposed than the land around it. For a baby, those small differences could be meaningful. This brings us back to the beginning of human life. Early humans survived by choosing places carefully. They did not simply exist in nature as if every place were equal. They read the landscape with their bodies. A windy ridge feels different from a sheltered hollow. Dry ground feels different from damp ground. A cave mouth facing one direction may feel different from another. A tree line may slow the air. A stone wall may hold a little warmth after sun or fire. These details could guide where a group rested, where a baby was held, and where materials were placed for sleep. Before blankets, keeping a newborn warm was partly the art of choosing the least exposed corner of a very large world. Shelter also organized people. Fire, bedding material, tools, food, and sleeping bodies could be arranged within a chosen space. A baby might be held near the body of a caregiver, protected from direct wind, kept at a careful distance from fire, and placed on dry layers when rest was needed. None of this required a modern house, but it did require attention to space. Where does smoke go? Where is the ground driest? Where does wind enter? Where can people sleep close without crowding the fire? Where can the baby stay warm without being too near danger? These questions were not abstract. They belong to the ordinary night. The evidence for ancient shelters varies widely. Some structures leave traces, some fires leave ash, some living floors remain. But many shelters made from branches, hides, grasses, or other organic materials disappear, we should not imagine that the lack of a surviving wall means people had no protection. A windbreak can vanish. A hide cover can decay. A brush shelter can leave only faint traces, or none at all. The deeper truth is that ancient warmth was often made from arrangements, not permanent buildings. Shelter was one layer among many: body warmth, fire, ground insulation, soft materials, and social closeness. Before blankets, a baby's safety may have depended on how well those layers worked together inside a chosen place. The shelter did not defeat cold. It gave human care a smaller space in which to resist it. A shelter works by changing the path of the cold. It does not need to stop the whole world. It only needs to slow wind, reduce dampness, hold a little heat, or give people a place to gather close enough for warmth to last longer. For an ancient baby, this smaller change could matter more than the shelter's size. A cave may have been large, but only one part of it might have been dry enough. A brush shelter may have been simple, but one side could block the night wind. A rock overhang may not have been a home, but it could keep rain from falling directly on a sleeping group. Before blankets, the important question was not whether ancient people had houses like ours. It was whether they could create a small pocket where a newborn body was less exposed than it would be in the open. That pocket depended on many things working together. A fire could warm one area, but the shelter had to let smoke escape. A dry floor could protect the body from below, but only if rain did not flow into the sleeping place. A hide or plant layer could slow heat loss, but it needed to stay dry. A caregiver could hold the baby close, but the surrounding air still mattered. The shelter shaped all of these layers. It decided where the wind entered, where smoke moved, where bodies gathered, and where the ground remained usable. This means that shelter was not simply a background scene, it was part of the method. The beginning of human life was always placed inside such conditions. A newborn did not experience the environment as a wide idea. It experienced the small space around its skin, a draft across the body, a damp surface beneath it, smoke in the air, or a colder corner of the shelter could change the quality of warmth. Ancient caregivers may not have described these things in modern terms, but they could feel them. They could know that one side of a shelter was calmer. They could notice that a certain patch stayed drier after rain. They could learn that fire placed in one position filled the space with smoke, while another position worked better. This kind of knowledge could pass quietly through habit. No writing was needed. The body remembered. The group repeated. The child survived inside the repeated arrangement. This is why a shelter should be understood as a managed space, not only a structure. A few branches leaning against a frame, a hide stretched against wind, stones arranged near a hearth, or people sleeping in a closer cluster could all help form a warmer zone. None of these arrangements should be turned into a universal picture for all ancient humans. Some lived near caves or rock shelters. Some used temporary camps. Some moved often. Some had access to different animals, plants, and climates. But the larger principle remains. People could change the immediate surroundings of a baby by choosing location and arranging materials. The baby's warmth was created inside that choice. Archaeology sometimes shows old hearths, post holes, prepared surfaces, or repeated occupation of sheltered places. These clues suggest that people returned to locations that offered protection, yet many shelters would leave little behind. Branches rot, hides decay, grass walls disappear, windbreaks collapse. A small arrangement made for a night may vanish before it can become visible to anyone in the future. The missing evidence again asks for care in our answer. We can speak of possibilities grounded in human need and known material behavior, but we should not pretend to see every wall or sleeping corner clearly. Before blankets, a shelter was a way of making the world smaller. Not safe in every sense, not warm in every direction, but smaller. Less wind, less rain, less open darkness, less direct contact between the baby and the vast cold outside. Inside that smaller world, body warmth, fire, dry ground, soft materials, and shared attention could work together. The shelter did not replace the caregiver. It gave the caregiver a better place to protect the child. Shelter closes this layer of the story by showing that warmth before blankets was never held in one place alone. It was spread across a small arrangement of decisions. A baby might be close to a caregiver, but the caregiver needed protection from wind. A fire might warm the air, but the fire needed a place where smoke could leave. A hide or dry grass layer might protect from the ground, but only if the shelter kept rain from soaking it. Each element depended on the others. A shelter was the space where these elements could meet. It did not have to look like a house to matter. It only had to make the night less open, the wind less direct, the ground less wet, and the warmth less easy to lose. For a newborn, that small reduction of exposure could be part of survival. The deeper human question is not only where ancient people slept, it is how they made a livable space around bodies that could not defend themselves. A grown person could endure more discomfort, move closer to fire, change position, or stay awake if needed. A newborn could not manage the shelter from inside it. The child depended on the group to choose the protected side, avoid the damp patch, place the fire with care, and gather bodies near enough for warmth to remain. In that way, shelter was not just made of branches, stone, hide, or earth. It was also made of attention. A rock overhang without good placement might not help enough. A cave with smoke trapped inside could become difficult. A brush structure with gaps could lose warmth quickly. The shelter became useful only when people understood how the space behaved. This brings us again to the origin of human life. Early humans did not begin with perfect homes. They began with bodies exposed to weather and with minds able to notice patterns. They learned, over long stretches of time, that a certain hollow was calmer, that a certain entrance caught too much wind, that one side of a fire was smoky, that dry material should not rest where rainwater passed. Such knowledge did not need to be written down. It could be carried in habit, in repeated return, in imitation, and in the quiet corrections made each night. A baby sleeping within that space received the benefit of memories it could not yet hold. The infant's warmth was protected by knowledge older than the child itself. Archaeology can sometimes show that humans returned to sheltered places, used hearths, arranged living floors, or occupied caves and open-air camps. But it cannot always show the thin wall of branches, the hide screen, the grass lining, or the exact sleeping cluster that once made one corner warmer than another. Many shelters were temporary. Some may have been repaired, moved, rebuilt, or abandoned after a short use. Their disappearance should not lead us to imagine that ancient people simply slept without thought. It only reminds us that the most practical parts of life are often made from materials that do not last. Before blankets, shelter was a temporary answer to a repeating question. How can a small body be placed where the world touches it less harshly? The answer could change with season, place, rain, wind, fuel, and the number of people gathered together. One night, the shelter might be a cave wall and a fire. Another, it might be a windbreak and dry grass. Another, it might be a hide screen, a caregiver's body, and a patch of ground chosen because it stayed less damp. None of these should be turned into a single universal picture, but all of them point toward the same quiet principle. Ancient humans kept babies warm by reducing exposure in layers. They narrowed the world around the child. They placed warmth inside a smaller space. They made the cold travel farther before it reached the skin. A shelter was not the final answer, but it gave every other answer a place to work. A baby's warmth has never belonged only to one pair of hands. Even when the mother is central, especially in birth, feeding, and close contact, the wider human story suggests that raising a helpless child often reaches beyond one body. This matters deeply when we ask how ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets. A newborn can need warmth at any hour. The cold does not arrive only when one caregiver is rested, awake, and ready. It can come during sleep, after rain, while food is being prepared, when fuel is low, or when the group is moving. One person can hold a baby close for a time, but human infants need care across many hours, many nights, and many changing conditions. Before blankets, warmth may have been protected not only by materials and shelter, but by the social structure around the child. Human survival has always been shaped by the fact that our young grow slowly. A newborn does not quickly become independent. An older infant still needs carrying. A small child still needs watching. This long period of dependence is often discussed as part of why humans can learn so much. But before learning becomes important, care must come first. The child has to stay alive long enough to receive language, skills, memory, and habits from others. In that sense, warmth is not a small domestic detail. It is one of the quiet conditions that allowed culture to pass forward. A cold baby is not only an individual problem. In the deep human past, it would have touched the future of the group. When we look at many human societies, childcare can involve more than the mother alone, though the exact patterns differ widely. Fathers, grandparents, older siblings, and other adults may all help in different ways depending on the society and situation. We must be careful not to take any one modern example and place it directly into prehistory. Ancient groups were diverse, and we cannot know every arrangement. Still, the broad human pattern of long childhood makes shared care reasonable to consider. A baby who needs warmth while the mother sleeps, eats, recovers, gathers food, or tends to another task may benefit from other nearby bodies. Warmth can pass from person to person because the baby can be passed from person to person. This turns warmth into something social. A fire warms a place. A hide covers a body. Dry grass lifts the child from the ground. But another person can add something different. Time. One caregiver may grow tired, while another remains alert. One person may notice that the child has shifted away from warmth. Another may add material beneath the child. Another may help carry fuel, food, or bedding so the main caregiver can keep the baby close. None of this needs to be imagined as a formal system. It may have been ordinary cooperation, shaped by repeated need. The beginning of human life depended on such ordinary acts, because helpless children made survival slower and more shared. Grandmothers are especially interesting in this wider question, not because we can assign one fixed role to every ancient group, but because older people can carry memory. They may know which places stay dry, how wind moves through a shelter, which materials become damp too quickly, or when the fire should be kept low rather than bright. Older siblings may also matter, not as perfect caregivers, but as part of a group where many eyes and hands surround the youngest life. The baby cannot remember the first winter, the first rainy season, or the first cold dawn. Other people remember for it. Before blankets, that remembered care could be as important as any object. The warmth around a baby may have come from bodies arranged by relationship. One person feeding, another tending fire, another gathering dry material, another lying close in sleep, another carrying the child when movement began. The exact scene is lost, but the pressure is clear. A human infant required more than heat. It required a circle of attention that could continue when one body alone was not enough. In this way, ancient warmth was not only physical, it was generational. It moved through mothers, fathers, older children, elders, and the shared habits of a group trying to keep its smallest member within the fragile boundary of life. Shared warmth becomes easier to understand when we think about time. A newborn does not need warmth once. It needs warmth again and again, through feeding, sleeping, waking, damp weather, cold mornings, and long nights. One person may be able to hold a baby close for a while, but human care stretches across hours when bodies become tired. In an ancient setting, this would have mattered even more. A caregiver might need to recover from birth, gather food, prepare materials, tend fire, move with the group, or sleep. The baby's need did not disappear during those moments. Before blankets, warmth may have depended on a circle of people who could extend care beyond the limits of one body. This does not mean we should imagine every ancient group in the same way. Human societies are diverse, and the deep past cannot be reduced to one family picture. But the long dependency of human children makes shared care an important possibility. A baby who could not regulate its own warmth needed more than an object. It needed continuing attention. A mother's body may often have provided the closest warmth, especially through feeding and holding, yet other bodies nearby could also matter. Another adult might carry the child for a time. An older sibling might stay close enough to notice restlessness. An elder might remember where the shelter stayed drier or which material worked better beneath a sleeping body. These roles would have varied, but the pressure behind them was steady. Warmth had to continue even when one person could not do everything. This brings the question back to the beginning of human life. Our species did not survive through isolated strength alone. It survived through dependence managed by groups. A child born helpless became a center around which attention, movement, food, shelter, and warmth had to be arranged. The baby did not contribute to the group immediately, yet the group protected it because each child carried the possibility of future memory. If the child lived, it could one day learn paths, foods, tools, stories, gestures, and ways of caring for another child. Warmth was one of the quiet bridges across that gap between helpless birth and future participation. The social side of warmth also helps explain why no single object can answer the title. A hide, a fire, a pile of grass, or a sheltered wall could help, but none of them could replace watchfulness. If smoke shifted, someone had to move the baby. If a covering became damp, someone had to change it. If the ground cooled, someone had to add material or lift the child closer. If the main caregiver became exhausted, the presence of others could matter. Warmth was not only stored in materials, it was carried in relationships. It moved through arms, sleeping positions, shared tasks, and remembered habits. Archaeology is limited here because social warmth is difficult to preserve. A hearth can remain, but not the person who kept watch near it. A scraper can remain, but not the decision to use a hide for a newborn. A cave floor can remain, but not the pattern of bodies sleeping close together. The most important evidence may be indirect. Human infants are highly dependent. Human groups are social, and long childhood requires sustained care. From that, we can carefully understand why baby warmth before blankets was likely part of a wider network of support. This is not a sentimental addition to the story. It is practical. The cold does not care who is tired. The wind does not wait for one caregiver to rest. The ground does not stop drawing heat because a group has walked far. A baby's body required continuity, and continuity is easier when care can pass from one person to another. Before blankets, warmth may have been one of the first shared responsibilities of human life. It was held not only in fire, skin, fur, grass, or shelter, but in the group's ability to remain near the smallest body when the world around it changed. The social warmth around a baby may be one of the least visible parts of human history, but it may also be one of the most important. Objects can be counted more easily than relationships. A hide can be imagined as a covering. A fire can be seen as a source of heat. A shelter can be described by its shape. But the quiet arrangement of people around a newborn is harder to hold in the mind because it leaves almost no lasting mark. Yet before blankets, this arrangement may have helped turn uncertain warmth into something that could continue. One person could hold the child, another could manage the fire, another could gather dry material, another could sleep near enough to add body heat. Another could remember that a certain place stayed less damp after rain. Warmth, in this older world, could be divided across many lives. This matters because a baby's need for warmth does not follow a simple schedule. It appears during the hours when adults are tired. It appears when the fire burns low. It appears when the ground has cooled, when the air turns damp, when a covering shifts, when a shelter lets in wind, or when movement begins before the day has warmed. A single caregiver may be central, but the need itself is larger than one moment and one body. Human infants grow slowly, and slow growth stretches care over time. In this way, the small body of a newborn may have helped shape one of the deepest human patterns, survival through shared attention. The child could not return the labor immediately. It could not carry wood, find food, prepare skins, or remember safe places. But the group's future passed through that child. To keep it warm was to protect a possibility that had not yet become useful. This is where the beginning of human life becomes different from a story of tools alone. Tools helped humans survive, but tools did not care by themselves. Fire helped, but fire needed tending. Skins helped, but skins had to be dried, placed, and moved. Shelter helped, but shelter had to be chosen and understood. A baby brought all these things together and demanded that they be maintained through time. The group did not only make warmth, it had to keep warmth from failing. That continuity may be the social heart of the answer. Before blankets, warmth could pass from body to body, from older knowledge to younger hands, from one night's arrangement to the next. We should remain careful. We cannot say exactly how every ancient group shared infant care. We cannot assign fixed roles to mothers, fathers, grandparents, or siblings across all of human prehistory. Environments differed. Social patterns differed. The evidence is indirect, but it is reasonable to see that a newborn's warmth would have benefited from more than one source of attention when possible. Human children require long care, and human groups are capable of shared support. That broad fact gives the question a wider shape. The baby was not simply warmed by an object. It was warmed by a system of people, materials, places, and repeated habits. Archaeology may show the hearth, but not the person who moved closer when the fire faded. It may show tools for working hides, but not the hands that placed a soft layer under a child. It may show a protected site, but not the quiet pattern of sleepers that helped hold warmth through the coldest hours. The missing evidence is not empty. It points toward the kind of care that happens too close to the body to fossilize. Before blankets, keeping babies warm was likely a shared human practice built from nearness, memory, and response. It was not only heat, it was the group's ability to keep returning warmth to the smallest life among them, again and again, until morning came. Not every ancient baby faced the same kind of cold. This is important because the human past did not happen in one landscape. Some groups lived in warmer regions where the air might rarely become freezing, but rain, damp ground, night wind, or exposure after sunset could still chill a newborn body. Other groups lived through colder seasons, higher altitudes, open plains, or glacial environments where warmth would have been much harder to keep. Some stayed near forests, rivers, coasts, caves, or rock shelters. Others moved across wide grasslands or more exposed terrain. So when we ask how ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets, we are not asking for one answer that fits every place. We are asking how human care adapted to many different versions of cold. A baby born in a warm forest and a baby born near a cold steppe would not meet the same dangers. The materials available would differ. One place might offer broad leaves, bark fibers, grasses, moss, or sheltered tree cover. Another might offer animal hides, fur, rock shelters, dry winds, or open ground where fire and windbreaks mattered more. In a damp climate, keeping materials dry could be as important as finding warmth. In a colder, dry landscape, blocking wind and holding body heat might matter more. In a place with strong seasonal change, the same group might face mild nights in one part of the year and dangerous cold in another. This variety is why we must be careful not to turn the ancient world into a single picture of people sitting beside one fire under one kind of shelter. Human beings spread because they could adjust. Their infants survived because care also adjusted. The beginning of human life was always local. A newborn did not enter prehistory as a general idea. It entered a specific night, a specific shelter, a specific season, a specific ground surface, and a specific set of people with certain materials nearby. The baby's body asked the same basic question everywhere: how can warmth be kept close? But each environment answered with different possibilities. In one place, closeness to the caregiver may have been enough during many nights, with only a light layer of plant material beneath. In another, body warmth might need to be combined with skins, fire, and a more protected sleeping place. In still another, the main challenge might be wetness, not deep cold. A damp covering can become a problem. A wet ground layer can take warmth away. A smoky shelter can make the warmest place difficult to use. The human solution was not one object. It was adaptation to conditions. Geography also shaped movement. In a mild landscape, carrying a baby close could protect warmth while allowing the group to continue daily life. In a cold or windy landscape, the same carrying might require more covering, better shielding, or more frequent stops. Near water, wind and dampness could make the body cool quickly. In high places, night temperatures could drop even when the day had been comfortable. In open country, the lack of natural windbreaks could make shelter arrangement more important. These are not dramatic scenes. They are ordinary environmental differences, but ordinary differences are exactly what matter to a newborn. The child's small body makes small changes larger. Pa. A little more wind, a little more dampness, a little less dry material, a little more distance from another warm body can change the quality of rest. This is also why ancient knowledge must have been practical and place-based. People had to know which places were colder after sunset, which shelters trapped smoke, which ground stayed damp, which materials dried well, and when a season made an old resting place less safe. Such knowledge would not appear as a written guide. It would live in repeated choices. It would be carried by older people, learned by younger caregivers, and tested each time the group stopped to rest. Before blankets, keeping babies warm was not a universal technique. It was a local conversation between the infant body and the world around it. The cold had many forms, and human care had to learn the shape of each one. Climate changes the question, because cold is not one single experience. It can be sharp and dry, moving quickly through wind. It can be slow and wet, entering through damp ground and soaked materials. It can come after sunset in a place that was warm all day. It can arrive with rain, with altitude, with seasonal change, or with long periods of shade. For a newborn, these differences matter because the body cannot separate one kind of exposure from another. The child only feels the result, warmth leaving faster than it can be held. Before blankets, ancient humans had to answer not an abstract cold, but the particular cold of the place where they lived. This is why geography must remain inside the story. A baby in a humid forest might not face the same night as a baby in a dry open plain. A baby near a river might be touched by damp air and morning fog. A baby in a rocky shelter might be protected from rain but placed near stone that stayed cool. A baby in a colder season might need more layers of body heat, fire, and material than in a mild season. The basic need remained the same, but the best response could shift from place to place. In one environment, keeping dry might be the first protection. In another, blocking wind might matter most. In another, the central problem might be how to keep warmth during movement between temporary camps. No single image can hold all of early human life. The beginning of humanity was spread across changing landscapes. People lived through different plants, animals, winds, soils, and seasons. The infant body forced each group to turn those local conditions into care. A dry grass layer only helps if dry grass is available and can be kept dry. A hide only helps if animal skins are available, prepared, and not soaked. A fire only helps if fuel can be gathered and smoke can escape. A sheltered place only helps if it is actually sheltered from the kind of cold that matters there. This makes ancient warmth less like an invention and more like a conversation with the environment. People had to learn what their place allowed. They had to repeat what worked and abandon what failed. The baby received the result of that learning without knowing it. Season also made warmth unstable. A place that was safe in one month might be less useful in another. A shelter that stayed dry in a dry season might become damp when rain returned. A camp that felt comfortable in afternoon sun might become cold before dawn. A riverbank that gave water and food might also bring fog and wet ground. A cave that blocked wind might hold smoke badly depending on how fire was placed. These are small practical problems, but ancient survival was often made of small practical problems. For a newborn, each one could change the quality of warmth. The child did not need a perfect climate. It needed people who could notice when the climate around the body had changed. This helps explain why the answer cannot be reduced to fire, skins, shelter, or carrying alone. In a windy place, a fire without a windbreak may lose much of its usefulness. In a damp place, a hide that is not dried may become less protective. In a warm place with cool nights, body contact and a dry surface might solve much of the problem. In a colder place, the same approach might need more support from shelter, fire, and thicker material. The ancient world did not give every group the same tools in the same amount. It gave them different problems and different materials. Human care had to fit itself to both. Archaeology can show some of this variety through hearths, site locations, animal remains, tools, and traces of occupation. But it cannot easily show how each group adjusted a baby's warmth on a rainy night, during a cold wind, or after a shelter became damp. That missing detail is why the honest answer must stay flexible. Ancient babies were not kept warm by one universal method. They were kept warm by local combinations of body heat, fire, dry layers, shelter, carrying, and shared attention. The title points to one question, but the deep past answers it in many landscapes, each with its own form of cold. The variety of ancient environments means the question cannot end with one fixed picture. There was no single ancient night, no single shelter, no single baby wrapped in one universal way. Human life spread across warm forests, colder open lands, river edges, mountains, coastlines, caves, rock shelters and temporary camps. Each place gave different dangers and different materials. A mild climate could still bring dampness. A cold climate could still offer dry hides and sheltered stone. A rainy place could make fire difficult but provide plant fibers and leaves. An open plain could make wind the main enemy. Before blankets, keeping babies warm meant learning the particular language of each landscape. The same human need was carried into many different worlds. A newborn's body made this variety more urgent. Adults can adjust their behavior when conditions change. They can walk faster, move closer to flame, sleep in a different position, or endure discomfort for a time. A baby cannot do this. The child depends on people who understand the difference between dry cold and wet cold, between wind and stillness, between a surface that feels only slightly cool and a surface that quietly drains warmth through the night. This kind of knowledge is not abstract. It comes from living in one place long enough to feel its patterns, or moving through many places with enough memory to compare them. The baby receives that knowledge as care. The deep beginning of human life was therefore never separate from geography. Human infants survived not because early people had one perfect object, but because groups could combine what each place offered. In a forest, the answer might lean more toward shelter from rain, dry plant material, and body warmth. In colder open land, it might lean more toward hides, fur, windbreaks, fire, and close sleeping. Near rivers or coasts, damp air could make dryness especially important. In caves or rock shelters, the protection from rain might be helpful, while cold, stone, and smoke still had to be managed. These are not certain reconstructions of one group. They are careful ways of thinking from the known needs of the body and the known differences of environments. Season added another layer. The same people might use one method in warmer months and another when nights grew colder. A sleeping place that worked in dry weather might fail after rain. A material that insulated well when dry might become heavy and cold when wet. A fire that warmed a calm night might become harder to manage in wind. A baby who was safe in one arrangement might need a different arrangement when the ground cooled, the air shifted, or the group moved to a new camp. Ancient warmth was not a finished solution. It was a flexible practice that had to keep changing. This is why the safest answer is not one object, but a set of relationships. The relationship between baby and caregiver, the relationship between fire and shelter, the relationship between dry material and ground, the relationship between weather and movement, the relationship between group memory and the next newborn. Geography and season changed each relationship. A blanket in the modern world hides much of this complexity because it makes warmth seem simple. In the older human world, warmth was spread across the entire way people lived. The landscape shaped the materials, the season shaped the danger, the group shaped the response. Archaeology may show traces of hearths, tools, animal remains, shelters, and repeated occupation, but it cannot give one answer for every climate. It asks us to think in careful ranges rather than certainties. Before blankets, babies were likely kept warm through different local combinations of body heat, fire, dry layers, animal skins, plant materials, shelter, carrying, and social attention. The form changed with the place. The need remained the same. A small body entered a large world, and human care had to make that world smaller, warmer, and less exposed, wherever people happened to be. The question now becomes more careful. What can we truly know about how ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets, and what must remain uncertain? The deep past does not preserve every act of care. It gives us fragments, a hearth darkened into ash, a stone tool shaped by hands, animal bones left near a living place, a sheltered cave floor, sometimes, in rare conditions, traces of plants, fibers, or other fragile materials. But it does not preserve the warmth of a sleeping body. It does not preserve the exact position of a newborn beside a caregiver. It does not preserve the moment when someone moved a child away from smoke, lifted it from cold ground, or replaced damp material beneath it. Much of infant care belonged to touch, timing, and temporary things. These are the parts of human life most easily erased by time. This is why the honest answer cannot pretend to be a clear photograph. It has to be a careful reconstruction from several kinds of evidence. We begin with the body, because the body gives us the most stable clue. Human newborns need warmth, protection, feeding, and close attention. They cannot choose their own shelter or manage their own exposure. That fact is not speculative. It is built into human biology. Then we look at the environments early people lived in, places with wind, rain, cold nights, damp ground, caves, rock shelters, open camps, forests, rivers, coasts, and seasonal changes. Then we look at what archaeology can show. Fire use in many human contexts, tools that may have processed hides or plant materials, repeated use of sheltered sites, and traces of living floors or hearths. None of these clues alone tells us exactly how one baby was kept warm. Together, they draw the boundary of what is reasonable. This boundary is important. It protects the story from becoming fantasy. We can say that body warmth was likely important because infants need closeness and adults can provide heat. We can say that fire could help where it was used, while also bringing smoke, danger, and the need for distance. We can say that organic materials such as hides, fur, grasses, leaves, reeds, bark, or fibers may have helped where they were available, but they rarely survive clearly. We can say that shelter and ground layers mattered because wind, dampness, and cold surfaces affect warmth. But we should not say that all ancient babies were wrapped in one specific way, placed in one exact sleeping arrangement, or protected by one universal invention. The deep beginning of human life was too varied for that. Archaeology teaches patience. Hard objects are louder than soft ones. Stone tools speak across huge distances of time because they survive. Fire sometimes speaks through ash and burned sediment. Bones speak when conditions allow them to remain, but a sling made from plant fiber may say nothing. A hide used for warmth may decay. A patch of dry grass beneath a baby may vanish after a few days, let alone thousands of years. The absence of these things does not mean they were unimportant. It means that the record is uneven. The most intimate parts of survival often leave the faintest marks. This is especially true for infants, whose care happens close to the body and inside ordinary routines. So the question of warmth before blankets must be answered with both imagination and restraint. Imagination helps us see that a baby's warmth could have come from many layers working together: a caregiver's body, a sheltered place, a safe distance from fire, dry material beneath, a covering of skin or plant matter, and other people nearby. Restraint reminds us not to turn these possibilities into certainty where the evidence is silent. The careful path lies between emptiness and invention. We do not have to pretend we know every detail. We also do not have to imagine ancient babies left without practical care, simply because the soft evidence has disappeared. The survival of human generations suggests that warmth was repeatedly created, protected, and restored. It was not always comfortable. It was not always successful. It was not the same everywhere, but it was real enough to carry the human line forward through nights whose smallest acts have mostly vanished. Archaeology is powerful because it gives the past weight. It turns old human life into ash, stone, bone, soil, and traces that can be studied. But archaeology is also quiet, where the past was soft. This matters for a baby's warmth. A hearth can show that people made fire in a place. A scraper can suggest that hides were worked. Animal bones can show that certain animals were present. A protected site can show that people chose shelter. Yet none of these things directly shows a newborn being kept warm. The evidence points toward the edges of care, not always to the care itself. Before blankets, much of what mattered may have happened in the space between durable traces. The body held close, the hide placed under a child, the dry grass gathered before night, the shift away from smoke, the decision to sleep nearer together when the air cooled. These acts shaped survival, but they rarely became permanent. This is why the question must be answered by joining different kinds of knowledge without forcing them to say more than they can. The human body tells us what a newborn needed. The environment tells us what dangers existed. Archaeology tells us what tools, fires, shelters, animals, and materials may have been part of life. Ethnographic knowledge from more recent small-scale societies can sometimes offer useful comparisons, but it must be used cautiously. A living society is not a direct window into the deep past. It can show what humans are capable of doing with bodies, materials, fire, and group care, but it cannot prove that one ancient group did the same thing in the same way. The safer path is to look for broad patterns, not exact copies. Babies need warmth. Organic materials can insulate. Fire can warm and dry. Close bodies share heat. Shelters reduce exposure. These are stable ideas, even when the specific ancient scene is lost. The deep beginning of human life was full of actions that left only partial signatures. If people used animal skins to help protect infants, the skin itself might decay, but tools for processing hides might remain. If people used plant bedding, the bedding might vanish, but a prepared living surface or rare plant traces might survive in special conditions. If people gathered around fire, the hearth might remain, but the sleeping order around it would be gone. If several people shared warmth around a child, the social arrangement would leave no clear mark at all. The archaeologist sees the burned earth, the stone tool, the animal bone, the shelter floor. The warmth itself has already disappeared. This gap does not mean we should invent freely. It means we should speak in layers of confidence. Some claims are stronger than others. It is strong to say that newborns needed help maintaining warmth. It is reasonable to say that body contact, shelter, dry materials, and fire could have helped. It is much weaker to claim a precise wrapping method, a fixed sleeping pattern, or one universal practice across all ancient humans. That difference matters for a truthful story. The past becomes more meaningful when we respect its limits. Before blankets, ancient babies were likely protected through combinations of care, not through one object that archaeology can easily name. The evidence asks us to imagine a practical world, but not a fantasy world. People used what their landscapes offered. They learned from repeated nights. They watched smoke, ground, weather, and the small body of the child. Some of this can be inferred carefully. Much of it cannot be recovered in detail. The honest answer lives in that middle space. Not silent, not certain, but slow, grounded, and attentive to what both the evidence and the human body can tell us. The limits of archaeology do not weaken this story. They make it more human. If the past preserved every gesture, every sleeping place, every fold of skin or grass around a child, the answer might feel simple. But deep time does not work that way. It keeps hard things more often than soft things. It keeps the stone, not always the hand. It keeps the hearth, not always the person tending it. It keeps the cave floor, not always the baby who once slept near the warmer side of it. So when we ask how ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets, we are standing beside a partial record. We can see the frame of life, but not every motion inside it. This asks for a slower kind of understanding. The newborn body gives us one secure starting point. It needed warmth, closeness, dryness, and protection from exposure. The ancient environment gives us another. It could be cold, damp, windy, smoky, uneven, or difficult to control. Archaeology gives us a third. It shows that humans used fire, occupied sheltered places, shaped tools, processed animals and plants, and returned again and again to landscapes that could support life. These clues do not form a single perfect scene. They form a range of reasonable possibilities. A baby might have been warmed by body contact. It might have rested on dry plant material, hide, fur, or another soft layer if available. It might have been kept near a fire, but not too near. It might have been protected by a windbreak, a cave wall, a rock shelter, a branch structure, or the closeness of other sleepers. The exact mixture would have depended on time, place, season, material, and custom. This is where truthful storytelling matters. It is tempting to fill the silence with a beautiful image and then treat that image as fact, but the deep past deserves better. We can imagine carefully without pretending to know. We can say that infants required care. We can say that organic materials often disappear. We can say that warmth probably came from layers rather than from one object. We can say that different environments required different arrangements. But we should not claim that every ancient baby was wrapped in the same kind of skin, placed in the same kind of cradle, or warmed by the same sleeping habit. Human history is older and more varied than that. The beginning of human life was not a single custom repeated everywhere. It was a long series of local solutions to the same fragile need. A child enters the world unable to guard its own warmth. The group responds with whatever knowledge and material it has. Sometimes that response may have worked well. Sometimes it may not have been enough. Ancient life was not made safe by care alone. Cold, illness, hunger, smoke, dampness, and accident remained real. But the survival of human generations tells us that care was often enough to continue the line. That continuation is itself a kind of evidence, though not a detailed one. It tells us that people found ways, again and again, to protect newborn bodies long enough for them to become children, learners, carriers of memory, and eventually caregivers themselves. Before blankets, the answer was not hidden in one lost invention. It was spread across many small acts that time rarely preserves. A dry place chosen, a body held close, a fire kept at a safer distance, a hide dried before night, a patch of grass replaced, a baby moved away from smoke, a group sleeping near enough to share warmth. These are not certainties as individual scenes, but they are reasonable shapes of care built from what we know about bodies, environments, and human life. Archaeology can guide us to the edges. Biology can tell us why warmth mattered. The missing space between them is where careful imagination must remain humble. In that space, the ancient baby is not a mystery to be solved with one object, but a reminder that much of human survival was made from fragile things. Soft materials, close bodies, repeated habits, and attention that vanished before it could leave a mark. Comfort did not appear all at once. It gathered slowly around the human body, one layer at a time. Before there were blankets in the familiar sense, there were bodies held close, fires managed through the night, dry grasses placed against the ground, hides softened by use, shelters chosen for wind and rain, and habits repeated because they worked well enough. A newborn did not wait for a finished invention. It lived inside this gradual world, where warmth was made from whatever people could gather, shape, remember, and share. When we ask how ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets, we are also asking how comfort slowly moved from living bodies into objects. The earliest warmth around a baby was probably not separate from the caregiver. It came from skin, breath, arms, and nearness. Then other layers could be added when materials and conditions allowed. A hide could hold warmth better than open air. A dry plant layer could reduce the cold from below. A fire could make the chosen place warmer. A shelter could block wind. None of these was a modern blanket, but each one moved human life a little farther from direct exposure. Comfort began not as luxury, but as protection against losing heat too quickly. The beginning of human life was shaped by this long movement from immediate contact to prepared surroundings. A newborn first depends on the body of another person. Later, if the group has materials, time, and knowledge, warmth can be held partly by things outside the body. This is a quiet change, but it is important. A piece of hide, a woven fibre, a prepared sleeping surface, or a sheltered resting place allows warmth to be stored, carried, and arranged. It does not remove dependence, but it changes the form of it. The baby still needs people, yet people can use objects to extend their care. This slow extension may be one of the deeper stories behind blankets. Textiles and woven cloth belong to later parts of human history, and their timing varies by region. We should not force one date or one path onto all people. Long before widespread woven bedding, humans could still use perishable materials: skins, furs, grasses, reeds, bark fibers, and other plant matter. Over time, as people developed more ways to process fibers, make clothing, shape shelters, and create more stable living spaces, warmth could become more portable and more predictable. But the older layers did not disappear. Even today, a blanket works because the body beneath it gives heat. The object slows the loss. It does not create the living warmth by itself. This reminds us that modern comfort still rests on ancient biology. A baby under a blanket is still a small body needing a protected boundary. The difference is that the boundary has become easier to make. What once required constant adjustment by fire, ground, shelter, material, and human closeness can now be partly provided by a soft object in a warm room. That change can make the past seem distant, but the older problem remains recognizable. Keep the child dry. Keep the child close enough. Keep cold surfaces away. Keep air from taking too much warmth. Keep watch when the body cannot protect itself. These needs are much older than the objects we use to answer them. The slow birth of comfort was therefore not a sudden escape from nature. It was a long practice of making the world less direct against the human body. For babies, this practice mattered deeply because they began life at the edge of dependence. Before blankets, warmth was built from care. After blankets, care could be folded into an object, but the object still carries the memory of what came before: body heat, gathered material, shelter, fire, and the repeated human effort to make one small life safe enough to sleep. A blanket feels simple because it hides the long history behind it. We lift it, spread it, and warmth seems to appear as if the object itself contains comfort. But a blanket does not truly create warmth. It holds back the loss of warmth already made by the body. This is why the older story remains inside the modern object. Long before soft bedding became familiar, people had to learn the same principle in rougher forms. A dry hide could slow the escape of heat. A layer of grass could separate skin from cold ground. A shelter could reduce the movement of wind. A fire could warm the space for a while. A caregiver's body could give heat directly. Each layer did part of what a blanket later came to do more easily. Before blankets, the work was divided among body, place, fire, material, and attention. The slow birth of comfort was not only about inventing better objects, it was about moving fragile human needs into forms that could be repeated. A baby held close depends on the strength and wakefulness of a caregiver. A baby placed on dry grass depends on whether the grass stays dry. A baby near a hearth depends on fuel, smoke, and distance. A baby in a shelter depends on the wind, the roof, the ground, and the arrangement of bodies nearby. Over time, as humans develop more ways to prepare skins, twist fibers, weave materials, sew coverings, and build more stable shelters, warmth could be made less uncertain. It could be carried more easily. It could be stored for the night. It could be placed over a child with less constant adjustment. But this was a gradual shift, not a single moment when cold was defeated. The beginning of human life still stood at the center of that shift. Infants made comfort urgent because they could not wait for ideal conditions. Their bodies needed protection in the present moment, with whatever materials were available. In this sense, many early forms of comfort were probably practical before they were beautiful. A hide did not need to be elegant to reduce exposure. A plant mat did not need to be permanent to lift a child from damp earth. A shelter did not need to be large to block the strongest wind. What mattered first was whether warmth stayed close enough, long enough, and safely enough. Later, human skill could refine these answers. Materials could become softer, more shaped, more portable, more predictable. Yet the older logic stayed the same. The body gives heat. The surrounding layer slows its loss. This also changes the way we think about blankets themselves. They are not separate from human history. They are part of a long chain of attempts to make care more reliable. A blanket carries forward the work once done by arms, skins, dry grasses, sleeping clusters, and sheltered firelight. It turns many scattered acts into one familiar object. But even now, the object depends on the same ancient reality. A blanket over an empty bed is not warm in the human sense. It becomes warm because a living body is there. The same was true before blankets. The material could help, but warmth began in life. As comfort slowly moved into objects, it may also have changed how people experienced dependence. A caregiver did not stop being necessary, but objects could extend care beyond a single touch. A covering could keep some warmth while the caregiver rested. A prepared sleeping place could preserve dryness for a while. A better shelter could make the whole group less exposed. For a newborn, these changes meant that the small boundary around the body could become more stable. The ancient question did not vanish. It became easier to answer. How do you keep a child warm when the night is colder than the child can bear? At first, the answer lived in bodies and temporary materials. Slowly, across many places and many generations, pieces of that answer were folded into objects that could be used again. Comfort became easier when warmth could be prepared before the moment of danger. A body can warm a baby now. A fire can warm the space now. But an object can wait. A hide can be kept near the sleeping place. Dry grass can be gathered before sunset. A plant mat can be carried or remade. A softened skin can be folded and used again if it stays in good condition. This shift is quiet but important. Before blankets in the familiar sense, humans may have already been learning how to place warmth into arrangements that could be repeated. The baby still needed living care, but the care could leave traces in objects, surfaces and habits. Warmth no longer had to begin from nothing each night. It could be partly prepared. This preparation marks a slow change in the human relationship with cold. In the oldest layer, warmth came most directly from another body. Then fire widened the circle. Then dry materials helped separate the body from the ground. Then shelter made the wind less direct. Later, as human skill with fibers, skins, sewing, weaving and dwellings developed in different places, warmth could become more shaped and portable. We should not compress this long process into one simple invention. Different regions changed at different times. Different materials were available. Some people relied heavily on animal skins. Others used plant fibers, mats, or woven forms when such skills and resources existed. The point is not to name the first blanket. The point is to see the direction of change, from warmth held only by living bodies and immediate surroundings, toward warmth helped by objects that could be stored, carried, repaired, and used again. The beginning of human life remained at the center of this change, because babies made reliability valuable. An adult can tolerate a rough night more easily than a newborn. A baby makes the cost of uncertainty higher. If the fire burns low, if the ground grows damp, if wind changes direction, the child has fewer reserves. Prepared materials help reduce that uncertainty. A dry layer beneath the body can be ready before sleep. A skin can be kept close in case the air cools. A shelter can be arranged so that the warmest place is not discovered only after dark. These are simple acts, but simple acts repeated across generations become culture. They become the inherited knowledge of how to make rest safer for the smallest body in the group. This is where comfort becomes more than softness. Comfort, in this older sense, means fewer direct attacks from the environment, less wind on the skin, less dampness beneath the body, less heat lost into the ground, less distance from human warmth, less risk that the cold arrives before anyone notices. A blanket is only one later expression of that wider desire. It gathers many older functions into a single familiar form. It covers, insulates, carries, folds, stores, and waits. But it still depends on the same old principle. The body gives heat, and the layer slows its escape. When we place a blanket over a baby today, we are using a refined answer to a very old problem. Yet the ancient answer was not primitive in the sense of being thoughtless. It was complex because it was spread across the whole setting. A caregiver's body, a fire, a dry floor, a shelter wall, a hide, a plant layer, a sleeping cluster, and remembered weather patterns all had to work together. Modern comfort can make this cooperation invisible. It can make warmth seem like a thing, when for most of human time it was a relationship between body, material, place, and care. Before blankets, ancient humans did not lack warmth entirely. They built it slowly from whatever their world allowed. Over many generations, some of that living skill became object, craft, and prepared comfort, but the child beneath it remained the same kind of fragile human beginning. At the end of this long question, warmth becomes more than a way to survive the night. It becomes a way to see what kind of creature a human being is. A newborn human enters the world unable to protect itself, yet surrounded by a species capable of turning cold landscapes into places of care. That contrast has been with us from the beginning. The baby is fragile. The group is inventive. The body loses heat. The hands gather material. The night grows cold. The fire is watched. The ground is softened. The wind is blocked. Another body moves closer. Before blankets, these acts were not separate from being human. They were part of how human life continued. When we look back across deep time, it is easy to focus on the largest achievements. Tools, fire, migration, hunting, language, shelter, and later agriculture and cities. But a baby changes the scale of the story. It asks us to notice the smaller forms of intelligence, the intelligence of choosing a dry place, the intelligence of knowing that cold comes from below as well as above, the intelligence of holding a child close without bringing it too near fire, the intelligence of replacing damp material before the body grows chilled, the intelligence of sharing care when one person is tired. These are not dramatic scenes, but they are deeply tied to survival. A group that could make tools but could not protect its smallest members would have no future to carry those tools forward. This is why the warmth of babies belongs to human history, not only to private life. Each newborn was a beginning that depended on others. It had no memory of the past, but the past surrounded it. Older bodies carried knowledge of wind, rain, shelters, materials, fire, and roots. The child did not know which ground stayed dry, which direction smoke moved, or which season made night colder. It received the benefit of those memories through care. In this sense, every protected baby was held not only by arms but by generations. Before the child could learn culture, culture had already protected the child's body. This is a quiet but important reversal. We often think children receive culture later, through speech, teaching, and imitation. But at the very beginning, culture may first arrive as warmth, a place chosen well, a fire managed carefully, a hide kept dry, a sleeping group arranged close enough, a carried body protected from wind. These acts do not require grand explanation to matter. They show that human life is built from repeated attention to vulnerability. The weak body is not outside the story of strength. It is one of the reasons strength becomes shared. The question of blankets also shows how much modern comfort hides. Today, warmth can seem easy because it is folded into objects, rooms, heating systems, clothing, and bedding. We can forget that every comfortable layer is a late answer to an older problem. The human body has not changed so much that it no longer depends on warmth. A baby under a blanket still needs the same basic protection from cold, dampness, and exposure. What has changed is the ease with which we build the boundary. The ancient boundary was built from bodies, fire, ground, materials, shelter, and people watching one another. The modern boundary can be made more quietly, but it still rests on the same need. So the question is not only how ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets, it is what that warmth reveals about us. It reveals a species that survived not by removing weakness, but by organizing life around it. It reveals that care is not a soft addition to human history, it is one of its foundations. Long before comfort became simple, human beings had to learn how to keep the smallest body safe inside a world that was never fully safe. There is a quiet lesson hidden inside the warmth around a child. It tells us that human survival was never built only from power over the world. It was also built from careful response to weakness. A newborn cannot command attention with usefulness. It cannot help carry food, protect a shelter, tend a fire, shape a tool, or remember a safe path. Yet the group must still protect it. This is not a small detail beside the larger story of humanity. It may be one of the larger story's foundations. The human line continued because adults and older children repeatedly gave time, heat, food, and attention to bodies that could not yet give anything back. Before blankets, this truth was visible every time a baby had to be kept warm through cold air, damp ground, or a long night. The child's warmth came from many layers, but those layers were all forms of care. A body held close, a dry place chosen, a fire watched, a hide kept from dampness, a shelter placed against wind, a group sleeping near enough to make the night less open. None of these acts needed to look grand. They did not need to become monuments. They did not need to survive as carved stone. Yet they were part of the reason any later monument, language, memory, or civilization could exist. Before people could build cities, they had to carry infants through weather. Before knowledge could be passed down, the bodies that would receive that knowledge had to be warmed, fed, and protected. The beginning of human culture may therefore be found not only in tools and symbols, but in the repeated care of small bodies. Warmth also teaches us that comfort has a history. A modern blanket can make warmth seem private and simple. It lies on a bed, It waits in a room. It can be folded and replaced. But behind that simple object is a long human struggle to make cold less powerful. For most of human time, warmth was not guaranteed by the place itself. It had to be gathered from the living body, from flame, from materials, from shelter, and from the memory of what worked before. A baby's body made every failure more serious. If the ground was wet, someone had to notice. If the fire smoked, someone had to shift the child. If the air cooled before dawn, someone had to bring warmth closer again. This is why the question is not only about the absence of blankets, it is about the presence of attention. There is also a gentle humility in this story. We do not know every ancient method. We do not know every sleeping arrangement, every kind of carrier, every soft material, or every small custom used by groups across different climates. The past is too wide, and the evidence is too incomplete. But we can still understand the shape of the need. Human babies required warmth. Ancient environments often made warmth difficult. People had bodies, fire in many times and places, shelters, hides, plants, and social bonds. From these broad truths, we can see a careful pattern without pretending to know every detail. The pattern is not one perfect invention. It is a way of living around vulnerability. That may be the most valuable message the question gives us. Human beings did not become human by escaping dependence. They became human while carrying dependence with them. Every generation began with a body that could not survive alone. Every generation had to answer that body with nearness, patience, and practical knowledge. Before blankets, keeping a baby warm was one of the quiet ways people said, without words, that the weakest life still belonged inside the circle. And perhaps this is why the image remains powerful even now. A small child asleep beneath warmth, held by objects and habits that began long before anyone could name them, as comfort, resting inside a history of human care that is still not finished. When a modern baby sleeps beneath a blanket, the scene can look simple. A soft layer rests over a small body, and warmth seems almost effortless. But behind that quiet image is a much older story. For most of human existence, warmth had to be made from closeness, from fire, from dry ground, from skins and plants, from shelter, and from the attention of other people. A newborn did not survive because the world was kind. It survived because human beings learned, slowly and imperfectly, how to place care between the child and the cold. That may be the deepest answer the question can give us. Before blankets, warmth was not one thing. It was a relationship between a fragile body and everything around it. The body of a caregiver gave heat. A fire widened the warm space but had to be watched. Dry material helped separate the child from the ground. Shelter reduced wind and rain without removing them completely. Other people extended care when one body grew tired. The landscape gave materials but also took warmth away through dampness, stone, air, and night. The baby rested at the meeting point of all these forces. It could not choose any of them. It could only depend on the living world of human care. This makes the history of warmth a history of attention. The most important acts may have been small. Someone choosing a drier place. Someone lifting the child from a cold surface. Someone turning away from smoke. Someone drying a hide. Someone gathering grass before night. Someone holding the baby closer when the air changed. These gestures did not become monuments. They did not leave clear lines in the earth. Yet without such ordinary care, the great stories of humanity could not continue. No tool tradition, no memory, no language, no migration, and no later civilization could pass forward unless infants first survived the helpless beginning of life. The smallest body in the group carried the future before it could understand the past. There is humility in this. We cannot know every method ancient people used. We cannot see every sleeping arrangement, every material, every carrier, every shelter, or every night of care. The evidence is incomplete, and it should remain incomplete in our telling, but we can understand the shape of the problem. Human babies needed warmth. Ancient environments could be cold, wet, windy, uneven, and unpredictable. People had bodies, fire, shelters, organic materials, memory, and social bonds. The answer was likely not a single invention, but a changing combination of these things. It was local, it was practical, it was repeated, it was sometimes enough, and surely sometimes not enough. That is the honest weight of the past. Yet the story does not end only in hardship. It ends in recognition. The blanket we know today is not separate from the older human world. It is a quiet descendant of many earlier layers. The arm, the hide, the grass bed, the firelit shelter, the sleeping group, the remembered dry place. It gathers those older acts into something soft and familiar. But even now, a blanket works only because there is a living body beneath it. The ancient truth remains. Warmth begins in life, and care is the way that warmth is protected. So when we imagine an ancient baby kept warm before blankets, we should not imagine only lack. We should imagine a circle of human effort around a body too small to protect itself. We should imagine the cold night outside that circle, and inside it, the patient work of keeping one fragile life near enough to morning. And perhaps the final question is not only how ancient humans kept babies warm before blankets, but what kind of creature learns to survive by warming those who cannot yet warm themselves.